Being you love can put a smile on your face and a bounce in your step.
You see couples walking hand in hand and instantly know whether they're in love.
It's a sensation that's almost impossible to describe. It's like a drug.
What is it that draws two people together?
She's a young girl that I think was impressionable.
But sometimes that love can fade, and so can the cheerful disposition.
You could just hear it through the phone and stuff, like pick an argument.
You can tell there was something not quite right with the relationship.
And when that happens, all bets are off.
It's hard to believe that anyone could do something like this, especially with children in the house.
We want to know the why, and it just didn't make a lot of sense in this one.
She kind of let the river take her where...
March 12, 2017, South Bend, Indiana. It's a cold, late winter morning in the city famous for being the home of the University of Notre Dame. While it is the state's fourth largest city, it's known for its small-town vibe.
I call South Bend a big, small town. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody's related to everybody. And if I don't know you, I know somebody you're related to or somebody else that you know. So it's really, you can't be anonymous in South Bend when you live here.
Shortly before 9 a.m., an elderly couple is driving home from Sunday Mass when they see an unusual sight.
The couple spots a young girl, about 8 years old, walking along the side of the road. And she's carrying what appears to be a baby or a small child in her arms. They looked down and saw that the girl was barefoot.
The children were dressed, I believe, in their pajamas. They thought, this is not right. We need to do something.
Their immediate response was to pull over because it just visually wasn't right for these children to be out there. So immediately they said, "What's going on? Are you okay?" You know, asking questions. And the 8-year-old responded that, "My mommy's dead. There's blood everywhere."
The couple immediately calls 911. Moments later, a police officer arrives.
They're in a residential area on Michigan Avenue in South Bend. The officer asks the little girl what's her name, and she says her name is Ariana. The officer asks Ariana, "Where are you going?" And she says that her aunt works at Rally's restaurant nearby where she was trying to get help. I can't imagine the fear that this little girl was experiencing. She's walking down the street early in the morning wearing pajamas, no shoes, and carrying her baby sister. She must have been desperate to get to her aunt to find help.
The officer is more concerned right now with finding out what caused the young girl to flee her home.
The officer, he says, "Can you show us where your house is?" And the 8-year-old says, "Yeah." And so he didn't have a car seat in his police car, so he asked the lady if she would ride along to hold the child. So he drove her and the 2 children back to the house, and the man followed in their truck.
They didn't have to drive that far. I think maybe a block and a half, 2 at the most, before Ariana is able to point that out and say, "This is where I live."
The patrol car pulls up to a small house on Michigan Avenue. Records show that the owner of the home is 33-year-old Kenyatta McCurry.
Ordinarily, police would need a warrant in order to enter a house. Now, in cases of exigent circumstances, or if they believe that a person could be injured or near death, they can enter without a warrant. And so that's what the officers did.
Of course, they're not going to take Ariana or the elderly couple in with them. So the officers directed them to stay in the car while they go inside.
And while they were waiting outside, of course, the lady is trying to comfort the child. And the lady said, "Well, maybe your mom's just sleeping." And the little girl said, "No, she's probably dead."
The officers cautiously enter the home, calling out to ascertain if anyone is inside.
They obviously want to help anyone who may be injured, but there is also concern that if there has been violence inside the house, the perpetrator could still be inside. So it's a very tense situation.
They're trying to clear the house just to see if they can find Kenyatta in there.
The initial officer looked at the living room area, the kitchen area, and then proceeded back into that back hallway where the bathroom and bedrooms were.
As they enter the bedroom, They see a woman lying face down on the top of the bed.
One of the detectives calls out, but the woman didn't respond. As they get closer, they can see a pool of coagulated blood underneath her head. They try to feel for a pulse, but don't get one. It's clear she's deceased.
The officers call into dispatch and request assistance from the County Metro Homicide Unit.
There would be a team on call 24/7. The technicians, the crime scene techs, would go to the homicide unit, get the crime scene tech van. It was basically an RV, respond to the scene to get an idea of what we're dealing with.
Chris Kronwitter is one of those homicide detectives.
I got a call about 9:30 in the morning saying that there had been a shooting and the victim was deceased. When I first I see several squad cars throughout the street. We didn't have a warrant for the home or anything at that point in time, so everybody stayed back, didn't go in.
Once the body was discovered, it's no longer exigent circumstances. No one is in peril, so police has to get a warrant to search the house for evidence.
Kronwitter considers interviewing Ariana, then decides to let an expert schooled in talking with young children handle it.
She was being transported down to the County Metro Homicide Unit, and we were, at that point in time, trying to get some of what we call our Casey workers that do interviews with younger children, try and get one of them lined up so we could get Ariana down for an interview with them. Since there wasn't a lot for us to do, we headed to the office at that point in time to start trying conducting interviews. When we got back to the office, we're also learning that she had a boyfriend and a sister that was there, and we're trying to locate them.
Police learn that Kenyatta McCurry's sister is named Amber Rankin. She works at a nearby restaurant.
Detectives sent a patrol officer to not only make a death notification, but also to pick up Amber to bring her back to the police station to be interviewed.
The police came to my job. It was really awkward. Like, they came through the walk-up and stuff. And, I'm just asking, how can I help you? So they just like, yeah, we're looking for Amber Rankin. And I'm like, okay, that's me. It was like, can you step out and talk to us for a second? I'm like, yeah, kind of, I guess. So at that point, I'm getting scared. I'm like, what did I do? Knowing in my head, like, I didn't do anything. And it was just like, yeah, we need you to come with us. They really didn't want to tell me anything. They just like, yeah, you need to call your boss, shut the store down, you have to go. So right then and there, I just got super nervous. Like, I just felt there was something going on with the family.
Amber closes the store and rides with officers to the police station.
They didn't let me drive my car. They just like, oh, you gotta come with us. And then one of the officers slipped to say, yeah, we have to go to homicide. So that's when I'm like, homicide, what's going on? They just said, Kenyatta has been murdered or something like that. Cause like, once they said Kenyatta's name, I pretty much just blacked out. Like, I didn't know how to feel or take it. Like, and I remember them talking to me, but I didn't hear nothing that they said outside of when they mentioned my sister's name.
Amber finds herself in a state of shock. And once they reach the police station, that shock soon turns into fear.
They was asking me crazy questions, basically saying that I was the last one there in the house with her and that I do it. I was very nervous, very scared.
Amber told police that she was living with her sister and had been there that morning. She said she left the house around 8:25, and it was just 20 minutes later that the couple heading home from church found Ariana and her sister walking along the road. So detectives had reasons to be suspicious.
The couple finds a young girl carrying her baby sister down a residential street in South Bend, Indiana. They have no idea the children are fleeing a murder scene.
Now, this suddenly makes sense. Neither one of them are wearing shoes or have coats. The circumstances just speak to the fact that they were incredibly frightened by what they had seen at their house.
At the McCurry home, investigators, equipped with a warrant, begin collecting evidence from the crime scene.
There was no sign of forced entry into the home, which suggests that the killer either had a key or was known to Kenyatta. In addition, the house was in good order. There didn't appear to have been a fight. All the evidence was limited to the bedroom.
There was just a single gunshot to the head. Crime scene techs found one spent .40 caliber shell casing in between the bed and the wall. There was also indentation in the headboard of the bed. When they dug through that indentation, they found a .40 caliber slug. This suggested that the bullet exited Kenyatta's head and entered the headboard.
But there's no weapon found inside the house.
That tells detectives that whoever the killer was, they took the weapon with them. Finding that gun, the murder weapon, is obviously going to be of the utmost importance. Find the gun, and you'll find the killer.
In the living room, officers found a bag of marijuana, an open purse, and some $1 bills. But there isn't anything that really explains why Kenyatta McCurry was dead.
Kenyatta McCurry was born in Chicago, Illinois, into what would eventually become a large family.
Kenyatta, she's the firstborn, and then I have a brother, Edward, and so many.
We called her Shay. She was a good little girl. She made sure that her siblings had everything. She didn't want it. If she had something and they didn't have something, she wouldn't take it. That's just who Shay was. She was great in school, very good. She wanted to be her own boss. She wanted to own restaurants. She liked to cook.
Kenyatta had her first child at 15. Then, in search of a better life, she moved to South Bend, Indiana.
Her brother was there and his girlfriend, and so Chicago was getting a little bit hard and rough, and she didn't want to be there anymore.
Kenyatta was a hard worker. She got a job as a certified nurse assistant and was cutting hair on the side. But she always had her eye on a goal of owning a restaurant.
Her passion was cooking. Yeah, that's what she was trying to get to.
In 2009, Kenyatta gave birth to a daughter, Ariana. But her relationship with the girl's father didn't stick. Then, in 2015, she began dating Gregory Jones.
When I first met him, he was nice. He was always nice to me, respectful. It was definitely giving like brother-in-law vibes. Like we was, building a little connection and stuff. Everything seemed fine.
Kenyatta and Greg have a baby daughter, Naisha. And then Kenyatta learns that she's pregnant with another child.
But to some, Greg didn't seem like he was fully committed to the relationship.
I would see him interact with her, stuff like that. Like financially, yes, he was there, but anything else, no, not really. I didn't see that connection with them.
He would spend a night at Kenyatta's on occasion, but it wasn't like he was actually living there full time. And Kenyatta believed that Greg was cheating on her, which is something they began to fight about.
A lot of times I hear her complaining like, oh, I don't even want to be with him, or, or that she's not feeling the relationship anymore.
Detectives press Amber regarding her possible involvement in her sister's death.
She admit that she was at her sister's house that morning, but that's because she was living there with her. But she denies any involvement in Kenyatta's murder.
She tells detectives that the night before, she went with her sister to celebrate Naisha's first birthday.
It was really fun. All the family was there, nieces, nephews. It was really just, celebrating Naisha's birthday. And yeah, it was a cool time.
Greg Jones, Keisha's father, was there as well. After the party, Kenyatta's girls went to an aunt's house, while she and Amber and several other family members went out, although Greg did not go with them.
We all decided to go to the casino, and we gambled a little bit, hung out a little bit, and we went home.
The next morning, around 8:15, Amber says she was awakened by her sister.
She was like, yeah, get up, you gotta go to work. Mind you, we didn't get home till like 3 a.m., so I was really sleepy that day.
According to Amber, as she rushed off to work, she passed Kenyatta's boyfriend Greg in the hallway, but wasn't sure exactly when he arrived.
I know as I was leaving out, he was walking past me. I don't remember if I heard the door open or close. Like he could have already been there before, as she was waking me up. I just can't fully remember.
Amber tells detectives she glanced back and saw Gregory and Kenyatta heading into their bedroom.
I would definitely say his energy was off because, I was walking past to get to the door and he didn't say anything. He just had, just a blank stare. It wasn't giving mad, sad, angry, happy, nothing. It was he was just there, just walking past.
Amber gets in her car and drives to work. And the 911 call made by the elderly couple comes in just about 20 minutes later. So if she's telling the truth about when she left, she could not be the killer.
Amber's story also places a bullseye on the back of Greg Jones, because at that point, he's the only person inside the house besides the two kids. Who else could it be?
Detectives know they need to track down Greg Jones as quickly as possible. But before they can even begin looking, there's a knock at the door of the police station.
I went to the door, and there's a couple standing at the door. I open the door, come to find out it's Gregory Jones, and demands to know what happened to his baby.
South Bend police detectives investigating the murder of Kenyatta McCurry are interested in talking with her current boyfriend and father of her youngest child, Gregory Jones. Before they even have a chance to notify him of Kenyatta's death, he surprises them by coming to the homicide office.
It's a Sunday morning, so the office isn't really open. Jones rings the doorbell, and Chris Frank, the county attorney, lets him in. And Jones demands to know what happens to Kenyatta.
He was very boisterous, very loud, gesticulating, big gestures, just kind of trying to throw his weight around a little bit. And there's this other young lady kind of in tow that really didn't assert herself.
The woman with Jones is 18-year-old Tiara Miller.
She was quiet. It was such a contrast between him and her. I don't know that she said a word. She seemed quiet and polite. And so I said, "You know what, sir? Let me get somebody to talk with you." And I ushered him into what we call our soft interview room right off the main lobby, and asked her to go have a seat in the conference room, which is a separate room. Normally, we try to do that with witnesses, separate them so they don't taint each other's stories. I walked back into the area where the commander's at, and one or two of the investigators are in there at the moment. And I said, "Guys, you're not going to believe who's here. It's the suspect." They said, "What do you mean he's here?" I said, "He's in the soft interview room right now. He just knocked at the door. I let him in." And they're like, "Holy cow."
Detective Kronwitter and his partner split up in order to conduct the interviews simultaneously.
It's standard procedure to that, so then detectives can compare notes. He said this, what did she say? Well, she said this, how does it compare to what he said?
Tiara's acting fine, I don't know really why I'm here. Gregory just was saying in the car, somebody killed my baby's mama. So I sit her down and get a timeline as to when she was first with Gregory and how long, where they were. And she's saying she's with Greg from 9:45, I think, the night prior until 8 something in the morning when the homicide happened.
It does fit with Amber's story that after the party at Chuck E. Cheese, that Greg left the group while Amber and Kenyatta and friends went to the casino.
She's essentially given Jones an alibi. She was with him the entire night until they came down to the police station. If so, he can be the killer.
At the same time, Kronwitter's partner is interviewing Greg Jones. Jones tells him he heard from a friend that police officers were at Kenyatta's home that morning, so he rushed over.
He says while he was there with Tiara, he got a call from his nephew, who told him that he heard that Kenyatta was dead. He then went to the homicide department to try and get some answers about what had happened.
He was definitely agitated, asking us, "Where's my child? Where's Kenyatta? What's going on?" We went by, we saw the police out at her house.
Jones claims he hasn't seen Kenyatta since he left Chuck E. Cheese after the birthday party.
He said he went to the party and then to Tiara's house, and they hung out all night into the early morning.
He said he didn't go to the casino with Kenyatta and Amber and their other relatives because Kenyatta was seeing some other man, which he called some mystery man that Kenyatta was seeing.
Jones says that he and Kenyatta have been dating for a couple of years and that he is the father of her 1-year-old daughter, Nyasha. He also tells detectives that Kenyatta was pregnant and was due in September, although he wasn't sure he was actually the father.
He said that when Kenyatta went to the doctor about her pregnancy, she also learned that she had a STD, a sexually transmitted disease. But when Greg went to get tested, He learned that he didn't have the STD, so he assumed she got it from someone else.
Jones admitted that this caused some strain in their relationship. He was now convinced that Kenyatta was cheating on him. Greg Jones's account that he was with Tierra all night not only gave him an alibi, it directly contradicted the statement of Kenyatta's sister, Amber Rankin.
Amber told police as she was leaving her sister's house that morning, Greg Jones walked past her and that he and Kenyatta walked into their bedroom together.
So now police have to wonder, was Amber wrong? Did she see Greg, or could it have been some other man? Or is it possible that Amber made up the story about Greg being there to try to pin it on him?
There was one other person who was there that morning, 8-year-old Ariana. Could she provide information that could help detectives determine who was telling the truth?
Our best witness at the time is an 8-year-old child.
Detectives investigating the murder of Kenyatta McCurry are faced with conflicting accounts of who was present in the house that morning.
Kenyatta's sister says she saw Greg Jones in the hallway as she was rushing off to work. But Greg denied he was there. Tiara Miller also told police that they were together all night.
They can't both be true. Someone is either mistaken or lying. Police have to figure out who.
Also present in the house that morning was Kenyatta's 8-year-old daughter, Ariana, and her 1-year-old infant, Nyasia.
Obviously, a 1-year-old cannot even talk, so that was a dead end. But Ariana was in 3rd grade, and she seemed to be a very bright young girl. The problem is that Ariana was very distraught over her mother's death, so detectives weren't sure what they were going to be able to get from her.
Police take her to the homicide department and wait for a social worker trained in speaking with children.
We have a specially trained forensic interviewer that interviews children.
Interviewing children can be tricky. It's not like talking to an adult. You have to be very gentle and realize that they don't have the same emotional resilience as do adults. Oftentimes, children will shut down and not talk at all. It's one of their defense mechanisms.
Some of the officers had gotten them pancakes and stuff like that for breakfast when they came down to the homicide unit. And she was feeding the baby and you know, making sure that everything was small enough for her and all this. Just seeing the way she was with the baby, she was very much a little mother herself. She was a sweet child, very intelligent. I mean, despite everything she'd experienced that morning.
The forensic interviewer arrives at the station and talks with Ariana.
They take it slowly, trying to avoid getting Ariana upset. So the interviewer asks Ariana what time she woke up that morning, what she did. Ariana said that she was sleeping on the sofa in the living room, and she woke up when she heard her mommy waking up Aunt Amber for work. She turned on the TV.
Ariana says she also noticed that her daddy was there.
Greg Jones was not Ariana's biological father, but he was the only father she knew. So she always called him Daddy.
She remembers her Aunt Amber telling her she was going to work and saying goodbye. And then a short time later, she couldn't say exactly how many minutes, her dad left also.
As Daddy, Gregory Jones, was leaving, he looked at her and said, "She's probably dead," and walked out. At that point in time, the child kind of dozed back off, but eventually woke up and wanted to have breakfast and start her day, and went into the bedroom to find her mother there.
She apparently tries to wake her mother, but can't. Becoming concerned, decides to bundle up her sister and walk down the street to a restaurant where her aunt was working. She didn't realize that it was 3/4 of a mile away, which is a long way for an 8-year-old to walk. And she's eventually rescued by the couple.
Ariana's account supports Amber's assertion that Gregory Jones was in the house that morning.
It does two things. It clears Amber of any involvement in the crime and tells police that Greg Jones and Tiara Miller are lying.
Detectives return to the interview room and confront Greg Jones with the information.
They also tell him, "We're going to get your cell phone data, especially the GPS information. And it's going to tell us exactly where you were last night and this morning. So if you were at Kenyatta's house, they're going to know. Jones thinks it over and then says, oh, that's right, I did stop by the house that morning. He said he had $5,000 in cash that he left in Kiana's bedroom and needed to pick it up.
He actually volunteered that it was weed money that he had gone there to get. It was drug proceeds. He wasn't somebody who was, a drug kingpin or anything like that, but he was definitely active in the local drug trade. He's a low-level guy, but high enough to make a substantial amount of cash. If you've got a band of $5,000 just stashed under the bed at your girlfriend's house, that's a substantial amount of money. And he said, I went to the house and grabbed the money and I turned around and ran away and left. Amber was still there, the girls were there, Kenyatta was fine when I left.
Jones said that whoever had killed Kenyatta must have known that he kept his drug money there and broke into the house after he left.
Detectives ask Jones what he did with the money he took from the house. He tells them he gave it to his girl, Tierra, to hold on to.
So they go get Tierra Miller's purse and find almost $5,000 in cash. But even though the money was there, they still wasn't buying the story.
The fact that he's already changing his story, that's where the meter pegs to the right. He's not being forthright.
Detectives continue pushing Jones, but he sticks to his story, claiming he had nothing to do with Kenyatta's murder.
Detectives realize, hey, we also got another witness in the other room who's also lied to us, Tierra Miller. Let's push her and see if she changes her story too.
I explained to her that this is a very serious case that we're working, and she needs to come off of the truth. We knew she wasn't telling us the truth from speaking with the other people in the interviews. And at that point in time, she stopped and did say, I'll tell you the truth this time.
When detectives confront Gregory Jones with his stepdaughter's statement, he admits he stopped by Kenyatta McCurry's house on the morning of her murder. Now, they hope his girlfriend, Tierra Miller, will also come clean. Tierra Miller was just 18 years old when she began dating 34-year-old Greg Jones.
She had just finished high school and knew Greg from the neighborhood. Of course, everyone in the neighborhood knew Greg because he was dealing drugs. Tierra also had a boyfriend named Caden that she had been dating for a while. And she met Jones about 3 weeks earlier and they started hanging out.
She's the younger girl. She's very impressionable. I guess in Tierra's mind, she didn't care about the age difference. I mean, that's almost twice as old. And she still dated him and stayed with him, even though she had another boyfriend. Tierra said that they'd only been dating about 3 weeks, and she was only seeing Greg because he bought her anything she wanted. Whatever she asked for, he would go out and buy for her. And she liked that.
Young people don't always make the best choices, and young people place fun at a higher priority than sometimes older folks. So the fact that this guy is kind of large and in charge and is throwing cash around and is willing to show her a good time, to a young lady, that's kind of attractive.
Detective Kronwitter tells Tierra he knows she lied to him, and they have witnesses who placed Greg Jones at Kenyatta's house that morning. She admits she lied and is now ready to tell the truth.
Tierra says that she was with Greg Jones the night before. He came to see her after he left his daughter's birthday party around 9:30 or so, and they were together for about 6 hours.
She says it was about 3 a.m. on the day of the homicide that she gets dropped off at her house by Gregory. She starts hearing from Gregory at about 8:45 to 9:30 and gets 18 different phone calls from Gregory saying, pick up, pick up, pick up. She finally does, and Tierra tells us that Gregory says, I'm coming over to pick you up right now. She doesn't get an explanation as to why or anything. Greg shows up. Tierra gets in the car with Greg. They drive to the murder scene and see all the police there, and Greg is saying, what happened? That's Kenyatta's house. And Tierra said, stop, ask the police what's going on. And he's like, no, I'm just going down to the homicide unit and talk with them down there.
But before they head to the police station, Greg directs her on what to say.
He said, I was with you all night long. When they ask you, tell them I was with you all night long. And she asked, why? And he doesn't give her an explanation as to why he needs that alibi.
Detectives also ask Tierra about the cash in her purse.
Where did you get this from? Well, Greg gave it to me earlier in the morning when he picked me up. Why? I don't know, but he said, here, is this a gift to you? Yeah, $5,000 and really no explanation.
I think it's clear that Jones gave her the money with hopes that it would secure her cooperation, that she would say what he asked her to say, that they were together all night. But once she realizes he's the primary suspect in his baby mama's murder, Tierra realizes it's not worth it.
Tierra voluntarily turns over her cell phone, which had received the incriminating calls from Jones. Then, she tells detectives she has a second phone at home.
Detectives assume that this phone also may have some incriminating calls or texts on it, so they want to analyze that phone as well.
At the end of the interview, we actually take her home to get the other phone, and she tells us, my brother has it, he's at church up in Niles. And we're like, you told us that it was here. Well, it isn't. He's got it up there. Can we go get it? No, he'll be back in a little bit. And since we were still at the very beginning of our homicide case, I left her at home. Call me as soon as you find the phone or your brother brings it back, and I will come and collect it from you.
The day passes without a call from Tierra. The next morning, Kronwitter calls her.
I phoned Tierra saying, where's the phone? Do you have it? No, I sold it to an unknown individual, and I don't have a way to get in touch with them. I explained to her again, that you knew this was so important. Why would you do that? After getting off the phone with Tierra, I called Chris Frank and said, here's what's going on. This is what she did. He said, go arrest her for assisting a criminal. My partner and I did.
You don't know what she's covering for. You don't know whether it's going to be evidence or whether it's just going to be embarrassing or what. But when they're continuing to hide things like that, that's where it gets to a point where we've got to make a determination: are we going to charge this person with a crime for possibly concealing evidence and for, not complying with an investigation like that?
My partner and I transported her down to the county jail. After she has been booked in the jail, is being taken into the booking area to be placed in a side cell, she yells to my partner and I lied, my purse is at the house, and it has the cell phone inside it.
Police don't know what the heck is going on now. She says she sold the phone and she can't get it back. Now she's saying it's at her parents' house. Why is she doing this, and what exactly is on that phone?
South Bend, Indiana police have arrested 18-year-old Tierra Miller for assisting a criminal after she fails to turn over her cell phone.
Sometimes they call it accessory after the fact in different places, where you didn't participate directly in the crime, but you did something to hinder the investigation or apprehension of a person who did commit a crime.
Investigators think that there's a good possibility that that second phone has more incriminating evidence on it. Perhaps it shows that Tierra was more involved in the murder than she's letting on.
Did he send something to her saying, hey, I just killed Kenyatta, I need an alibi? We didn't know. I went back to the County Metro Homicide Unit, typed out a search warrant for the residence, and once it was signed by the judge, we headed out there and found the purse and the phone that she was talking about.
The department's cyber crimes unit examines the phone. Strangely, the phone contains nothing related to the murder of Kenyatta McCurry.
Maybe there's stuff on her phone that she doesn't want the police to look at, she doesn't want her mom to know about, photographs, whatever, right?
Gregory Jones is charged with murder in the death of Kenyatta McCurry.
Tierra Miller is also charged with a level 5 felony for assisting a criminal, which prosecutors used to compel her to testify against Jones. They let her know that if she does testify truthfully against Jones, that they will drop the charges against her. That incident gives us a pretty good look at the nature of their relationship. He tries to bribe her with $5,000 in cash, and when that doesn't work, he tries to bury her. But Tierra's not interested in the money or marriage to a man she barely knows. She's upset that he's trying to use her to get away with murdering his baby mama.
Gregory Jones' trial takes place in May 2018. While police never find the murder weapon, prosecutors present a compelling circumstantial case.
So you've got a 20-minute time frame, roughly, from when Amber leaves to when the 911 is called. Amber sees Greg Jones there that morning. The child says that her dad was there, and her dad said that she's probably dead. And that's the time period we know that that crime occurred.
Amber and Ariana's testimony was backed up by Greg Jones' cell phone's GPS, which placed him in the vicinity of the house during the time period.
Prosecutors also present evidence on the brutal nature of the crime.
The autopsy revealed that that single gunshot wound had been fired with the firearm jammed into Kenyatta Mitchell's mouth, to the point where the end of the barrel was past her teeth. She would have been choking on it when he pulled the trigger.
It's just a brutal, brutal homicide. To do that to your child's mother and your girlfriend while the kids are in the house it says a lot about Gregory right there. And then his lack of remorse, of course, when he's confronted with everything that's going on. He never once shed a tear for her.
The fact that Gregory Jones was then so casual about how he walked past a child and said she's probably dead after having done that to that lady. That's tough.
Prosecutors believe jealousy was likely the reason for the murder.
There was some evidence to suggest a motive. They had been having issues. Gregory Jones stated that they had been arguing a lot, that he suspected her of infidelity. He suspected maybe the child wasn't his. He mentioned whether there was a sexually transmitted disease that she maybe had that he didn't have, so he thought she was cheating on him with some other guy.
The irony in this is that Greg Jones had been cheating on Kenyatta for a while and had even been with Tierra Miller the night before. So cheating was okay for him, just not for her.
Tierra Miller testifies that Greg Jones asked her to lie and say she was with him the morning of the murder.
He had changed his story and he had fabricated an alibi, all of which points to consciousness of guilt. You know, an honest person doesn't have to lie. If you're going to lie like that and make some other young lady lie with you and for you, that doesn't look good.
The jury finds Greg Jones guilty of murder. He is sentenced to 65 years in prison.
I just wanted to throw up just looking at him like he had no remorse, no sympathy, no nothing.
I was angry that something wrong with him. And all the time you're accusing my daughter of cheating when you're the one doing it, it's a crazy reason to kill someone. My baby, she's resting in peace now.
After the trial, the state drops all charges against Tierra Miller.
My anger and stuff was never towards her. I felt bad for her. She didn't even really know what was going on.
Tierra, you see, she's a young girl that I think was impressionable by Gregory, and she's thinking what she's doing is the right thing by not giving us the phone, lying to us in the beginning, and that ultimately ended up causing her to go to jail.
I'm sure she didn't plan to be involved in any of this, but she kind of let the river take her where it wanted. And when the river is this guy's personality, you have to be careful about where that's going to take you. I guarantee you, when Tierra Miller looks back, she won't remember the 2 weeks of fun that she had running around with Greg Jones. She's going to remember that he sucked her into a murder and it was the worst thing that ever happened to her.
We can sometimes be drawn to the wrong person for the wrong reasons. When that happens, both parties may wind up hurt, and innocent victims may also find themselves ensnared in a web of evil and misfortune.
An execution in a small Midwest town where everyone knows everyone's name. A beloved local figure whose public smile masked a decades-old nightmare. And a microscopic strand of DNA buried in a forgotten evidence box for nearly 20 years that finally shattered an entire community's reality. Below is part 1 of an 11-part continuous, high-tension, cinematic voiceover script in English for Ohio 2005 Cold Case Solved. Genetic Genealogy Unmasks Town's Mayor. Part 1. Some secrets don't stay buried in the quiet soil of the Midwest. They sit in the dark, breathing, waiting, hiding behind warm smiles, tight handshakes, and Sunday morning church pews. In a town where everybody knows your name, where doors are left unlocked and porch lights burn soft and yellow against the humid summer air, a monster isn't a stranger creeping through the woods. Sometimes, the monster sits at the head of the city council table. Sometimes, the monster wears the mayor's pin. It was October 14th, 2005, a crisp, autumn Tuesday in the idyllic town of Oak Haven, Ohio. A place built on family-owned hardware stores, high school Friday night football, and sprawling cornfields that turn golden under the pale October sun. Population: 8,400. Violent crime rate: practically zero. Until that morning. Until 6:30 a.m., when a cold rain began to fall over Mill Creek Road, and a butcher's delivery truck pulled into the gravel driveway behind the historic two-story Victorian house belonging to 32-year-old Clara Mercer. Clara was Oak Haven's sweetheart, a devoted third-grade schoolteacher, a woman who spent her weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter, a neighbor who baked pies for new families moving onto the block. She was quiet, gentle, and utterly harmless. But when her younger sister, Hannah, hadn't heard from her in 24 hours, she knew something was wrong. Clara never missed morning roll call at Oak Haven Elementary. Never. The back door of the Victorian home was slightly ajar. Not kicked in. Not splintered. Just resting open by a fraction of an inch, swinging gently in the damp autumn breeze. When officers from the Oak Haven Police Department crossed that threshold, their boots squeaking against the polished oak floorboards, the air inside smelled of stale cinnamon tea, copper, and absolute terror. They found Clara in the downstairs study. The scene was a nightmare carved into the heart of a small town. Clara was bound to a heavy wooden armchair with heavy-duty industrial zip ties. Her eyes were wide, frozen in a final, agonizing expression of shock. She had been beaten, tortured, and executed with a single, point-blank gunshot to the back of the head. A 9mm casing lay glinting on the Persian rug just inches from her slippered feet. There was no sign of forced entry. No shattered glass. No peaked locks. Clara Mercer had opened her door to her killer. She had poured him a cup of coffee. On the mahogany desk beside her body sat 2 ceramic mugs. One was half empty, stained with Clara's pink lipstick. The other mug, a plain white cup, was completely drained. Cleaned. Wiped down so thoroughly that not a single latent fingerprint remained on its porcelain surface. The local police force was instantly overwhelmed. Oak Haven hadn't investigated a homicide since 1974. Chief David Miller, a grizzled veteran who had spent 30 years breaking up bar fights and handling deer vehicle collisions, stood in the center of Clara's study, his face pale, his hands shaking as he dialed the State Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Within hours, black and gold state trooper vehicles and mobile crime lab units sealed off Mill Creek Road. Yellow police tape fluttered against the falling autumn leaves. The town woke up to a nightmare it couldn't comprehend. Headlines tore across state newspapers like a sudden lightning strike. Brutal execution in Oak Haven, beloved teacher murdered in her home, killer loose in small-town Ohio. Panic spread like wildfire through the manicured neighborhoods. Hardware stores completely sold out of deadbolts, window locks, and shotguns within 48 hours. Neighbors began side-eyeing neighbors. Every dark window became a threat. Every passing pickup truck became a suspect. The early investigation was a chaotic scramble for answers. State forensic technicians spent 4 days inside the Victorian house. They dusted every square inch of the study, the kitchen, the hallway, and the rear patio. They lifted dozens of partial fingerprints, but every single one belonged to Clara, her sister Hannah, or the local handyman who had painted the porch 2 weeks prior. Whoever killed Clara Mercer was precise, professional, cold-blooded. They left no bloody footprints. They took the murder weapon with them. They took Clara's cell phone and her purse, making it look like a robbery gone wrong. But investigators knew better. You don't bind a woman with industrial zip ties and execute her execution style for $40 and a leather wallet. This was personal. This was deliberate. This was a targeted hit in the heart of rural Ohio. The first major clue came from the plain, white coffee mug. While the killer had wiped the handle and the outer porcelain clean of fingerprints, forensic specialists used specialized saline swabs to capture microscopic residue from the rim. In 2005, technology was primitive compared to today's standards, but state labs managed to isolate a partial, highly degraded male DNA profile. It wasn't enough to run through CODIS, the National FBI database, without generating thousands of false positives, but it confirmed one crucial fact. The killer was a man. And he had taken a drink while watching Clara Mercer die. As the weeks turned into months, the suspect list grew long and bizarre. Investigators looked at ex-boyfriends, disgruntled parents from the elementary school, itinerant workers passing through on Highway 30, and local business owners. Over 200 men in Oak Haven voluntarily provided cheek swabs for DNA comparison. They wanted their names cleared. They wanted the killer caught. Standing at the forefront of the town's grief was Oak Haven's youngest, most dynamic city councilman, 34-year-old Thomas Vance. Vance was a rising political star in the county. Handsome, charismatic, articulate, and deeply involved in local charity work, Vance was the man who organized the candlelight vigils for Clara. He stood on the steps of the municipal building before hundreds of crying citizens, his voice breaking with emotion as he pledged a $10,000 reward from city funds for any information leading to the killer's arrest. He hugged Clara's grieving sister on national television. He shook Chief Miller's hand in front of the press cameras, promising that Oak Haven would never rest until justice was served. "We will find the monster who did this," Thomas Vance proclaimed into a wall of news microphones in November 2005, his blue eyes filled with fierce determination. "He cannot hide from us. Oak Haven will not live in fear." His words reassured the community. The town rallied behind Vance. In the years following the murder, his political trajectory skyrocketed. He was elected mayor of Oak Haven in a landslide victory in 2008, promising modern police equipment, economic development, and safer streets. For nearly 2 decades, Mayor Thomas Vance was the rock of the community, a family man, a civic leader, a symbol of resilience in the face of an unsolved tragedy. Meanwhile, Clara Mercer's case file grew cold. The initial mountain of leads dwindled to a trickle, and the trickle eventually stopped altogether. The manila folder labeled Case 05-8821 was filed away into a heavy steel cabinet in the basement of the Allen County Sheriff's Office. The yellow police tape on Mill Creek Road faded, tore, and blew away into the winter winds. The house where Clara died was eventually sold at a bank auction, its dark history whispered about by local teenagers who dared each other to run up and touch the front porch on Halloween night. 14 years passed, then 18. To the world, the execution of Clara Mercer was just another entry in the vast, tragic library of American cold cases, a ghost story told over coffee in local diners, an unsolved mystery discussed on late-night true crime forums. The killer had gotten away with it. He had walked off into the cold October rain, wiped his hands clean, and built a pristine life on top of a buried nightmare. He believed the passage of time was his ultimate protection. He believed the rain had washed away his sins. He didn't know that 3 miles away, in a sealed, sterile evidence locker, a small plastic tube containing a swab from a white ceramic mug was waiting. He didn't know that science was quietly, relentlessly evolving in the shadows. And he didn't know that his past was about to catch up with him in a way he could never have anticipated. The calendar pages turned with relentless speed, dragging the town of Oak Haven out of the dark shadow of 2005 and into a fast-paced, digital century. The golden cornfields along Highway 30 were slowly carved up by real estate developers, replaced by sprawling suburban tracts, strip malls, and gleaming corporate parks. The old Victorian house on Mill Creek Road had its cedar siding painted slate gray, its dark interior renovated into an airy, sunlit space where a new young family made breakfast every morning, completely oblivious to the terror that had soaked into the oak floorboards beneath their feet 20 years prior. For nearly 2 decades, the memory of Clara Mercer became something soft, distant and blurred by time. She became a memorial bench in the courtyard of Oak Haven Elementary School. She became a faded photograph inside a dusty glass trophy case in the municipal library lobby. To the children born after 2005, her name was a legend, a cautionary tale told by parents warning them to lock the front door at night and never speak to strangers. To the men who wore the badge of the Oak Haven Police Department and the Allen County Sheriff's Office, however, Case 05-8821 remained an open, bleeding wound. Chief David Miller had retired in 2014, his hair turned snow white, his shoulders bowed by the heavy, silent weight of an unsolved execution. On his last day in office, Miller sat alone at his desk, staring down at the yellowed crime scene photos of Clara's study. He didn't pack up his coffee mugs or his service awards first. He took the thick manila folder of Case 05-8821, carried it down the narrow concrete stairwell to the basement storage room, and handed it directly to a young, eager 32-year-old detective named James Wright. Jimmy, the old chief had said, his voice gravelly and trembling with decades of frustration, "I'm leaving you with the only failure of my 30-year career. I promised Clara's sister that I'd put handcuffs on the man who did this. I failed her. Don't you dare let this box collect dust. The bastard who drank from that white mug is still out there, walking among us, breathing the same air, pretending to be a human being. Find him." Detective James Wright took the file. For the next 10 years, Wright became the silent guardian of Clara Mercer's memory. While handling the daily grind of domestic disputes, property burglaries, and drug busts across Allen County, Wright spent his late nights sitting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the cold case office, pulling the Mercer file, rereading every witness interview, rechecking every alibi, and staring at the high-resolution scans of the crime scene. The initial investigation had been massive, but it was littered with dead ends. Back in 2005, state investigators had interviewed over 300 potential witnesses, neighbors, and acquaintances. They had examined Clara's financial records down to the penny. She had no debt, no secret bank accounts, no hidden safety deposit boxes. She wasn't involved in blackmail, she had no jealous ex-lovers lurking in the shadows, and she had never expressed fear of anyone in Oak Haven. She was a woman whose life was an open book, entirely transparent, filled with simple acts of kindness. That was what made her murder so deeply terrifying to the community. It defied logic. It defied reason. A beloved third-grade teacher doesn't get bound with heavy-duty industrial zip ties and shot in the back of the head in her own living room without a powerful, hidden reason. Yet, despite thousands of man-hours spent following leads across Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, the case had slowly flatlined. By 2021, 16 years after the murder, the original evidence locker at the Allen County Sheriff's Office had undergone 3 separate physical renovations. Through every move, through every reorganization, Detective Wright personally transferred Box 05-8821, himself. Inside that cardboard box sat sealed plastic bags containing the clothes Clara wore on the morning she died, the 9mm shell casing recovered from the Persian rug, the industrial zip ties that had bound her wrists, and, tucked safely inside an airtight, sterile glass container, the plain white ceramic coffee mug. That mug was the phantom witness, the ultimate silent key to the locked door. In 2005, the State Forensic Lab had utilized standard short tandem repeat, STR, DNA testing on the swabbing taken from the cup's porcelain rim. The test had yielded only a weak, degraded, partial male profile, containing fewer than 6 readable loci out of the standard 13 required for a Cody's upload. When Detective Wright ran that partial profile through the FBI's national database in 2010 and again in 2016, the computer returned a cold, indifferent screen, and no matching profiles found. The killer was not in the National Criminal Database. He had never been arrested for a felony. He had no violent criminal record on file anywhere in the United States. He was an invisible man, hidden in plain sight, protected by the technical limitations of 20th century forensic science. Then, the world of criminal forensics experienced a seismic, revolutionary shift. Between 2018 and 2023, the emergence of investigative genetic genealogy, IgG, completely transformed the landscape of law enforcement. Cases that had sat stone cold for 40, 50 years, most notably the capture of the Golden State Killer in California, were suddenly being solved in weeks. Forensic scientists were no longer reliant on the limited STR profiles stored in CODIS. By utilizing advanced whole genome sequencing, laboratories could read millions of single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs, from degraded, ancient, or microscopic human biological samples. More importantly, scientists no longer needed a direct match to a suspect's criminal record. By uploading these high-definition SNP profiles into open-source consumer genealogy databases like GeneMatch and FamilyTreeDNA, platforms where millions of ordinary citizens had voluntarily uploaded their DNA to discover their family trees, investigators could map out complex, sprawling ancestral networks. If a killer's second cousin, third cousin, or great-aunt had uploaded a saliva sample to trace their family tree, genetic genealogists could work backward through historical records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, and census data to isolate a single branch of a family. They could narrow down millions of potential suspects to a single household, a single generation, and a single living man. In the spring of 2024, Detective James Wright decided it was time to unleash this new scientific weapon on the ghost of Mill Creek Road. Equipped with a special federal cold case grant obtained through the Ohio Attorney General's office, Wright carried the sealed glass container housing the white ceramic mug to the state's premier advanced genomics laboratory in Columbus. There, he met with Dr. Eris Thorne, a world-renowned forensic geneticist who specialized in extracting usable genetic profiles from heavily degraded historical evidence. Dr. Thorne stood in his sterile, climate-controlled laboratory, examining the 32-year-old mug under intense halogen lighting. In 2005, Detective Wright, Dr. Thorne explained, his voice low and measured as he adjusted his safety goggles, they were using chemical swabs that barely scraped the surface of what was trapped on this ceramic. Porcelain is porous under microscopic examination. When a human lip presses against a cup, it doesn't just leave saliva, it deposits microscopic epithelial skin cells that get trapped in the microscopic microcracks of the glaze. In 2005, those cells were unreadable. Today, with ultra-deep sequencing, we can read every single base pair. Using a specialized microvacuum suction probe and non-destructive enzymatic liquid extraction buffers, Dr. Thorne's team spent 72 continuous hours processing the rim and outer edge of the white coffee cup. They recovered a minute, microscopic cluster of ancient biological material, less than 10 human cells that had clung to the porcelain through 19 long years of cold storage. The recovered cellular material was placed inside a multi-million-dollar next-generation sequencer. For 5 agonizing days, supercomputers worked around the clock, amplifying the broken, ancient DNA fragments, stitching together millions of genetic markers like a massive, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. On May 14, 2024, at 2:15 a.m., the laboratory's supercomputer completed its final computational pass. Dr. Thorne dialed Detective Wright's personal cell phone immediately. Wright answered on the first ring, sitting up in his bed in the dark, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Jim," Dr. Thorne said, his voice trembling with quiet, electrical excitement. "We got it. We didn't just get a partial profile. We pulled a pristine, high-definition, 2 million SNP genomic profile from the rim of that mug. The ghost on Mill Creek Road finally gave us his complete biological blueprint." 4 days later, on May 18, 2024, the digital file containing the SNP profile was officially uploaded into the secure, encrypted database of GeneMatch under a court-ordered law enforcement authorization. The digital net had been cast into the deep, vast ocean of human history. The microscopic phantom who had executed Clara Mercer in her study, who had wiped his fingerprints clean, who had walked out into the rain and built a bulletproof life of respectability, was about to discover that his family tree had just become his ultimate executioner. The digital upload of the 2 million SNP genomic profile into the GeneMatch database at 8 a.m. on Monday, May 20, 2024, signaled the beginning of an unprecedented digital hunt. Inside a quiet, windowless workstation office at the Allen County Sheriff's Office, Detective James Wright sat beside Dr. Evelyn Reed, a senior forensic genealogist brought in specifically to spearhead the familial mapping process for Case 05-8821B. The atmosphere in the room was suffocatingly tense. For 19 years, the identity of Clara Mercer's killer had been a complete void, a shadow without a face, a voice without a name. But as the supercomputing algorithms cross-referenced the unknown killer's raw genetic data against millions of public user profiles, the digital web began to ignite. "We have immediate, high-confidence algorithmic hits," Dr. Reed announced, her dark eyes tracking lines of data cascading down her high-resolution dual monitors. "GED match isn't giving us a direct match. The killer himself never uploaded his DNA to a commercial site. But we are pulling strong familial anchor points." Detective Wright leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "How close?" "First primary anchor." Dr. Reed pointed to a digital profile uploaded by a 62-year-old woman living in suburban Pittsburgh. Shared 2 10 centimorgans across 11 distinct chromosomal segments. That indicates a second cousin once removed or a third cousin. Second primary anchor. A profile uploaded by a user in Indianapolis, sharing 145 centimorgans. The algorithm is mapping both of these distinct genetic nodes back to a single ancestral couple who married in Mahoning County, Ohio, in 1912, Arthur and Eleanor Vance. Wright felt a sharp, cold electric shock travel down his spine. The name Vance was not a distant, obscure surname in Allen County. It was etched into the very granite facades of Oak Haven's public buildings. "Vance," Wright whispered, his voice barely audible in the quiet room. "Are you sure about that ancestral root?" "The mathematical probability is over 99.9%, Dr. Reed replied firmly, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she opened digital census archives, land deeds, and birth registries dating back over a century. The unknown DNA left on that white ceramic mug belongs unequivocally to a direct biological descendant of Arthur and Eleanor Vance. For the next 14 days, Dr. Reed operated like a forensic archaeologist, constructing a vast, multi-generational digital family tree that encompassed 4 generations, over 200 individual birth certificates, marriage licenses, military discharge papers, and obituary notices. The descendants of Arthur and Eleanor Vance had branched out across Ohio, Indiana, and Pennsylvania throughout the 20th century. Through painstaking, systematic elimination, excluding individuals who were biologically female, men who were too young or elderly in October 2005, and individuals whose deaths prior to 2005 were fully documented by state death certificates, the massive genetic canopy began to shrink. By early June 2024, the mathematical converging lines pointed to a single, specific family branch rooted firmly in Allen County. Arthur and Eleanor Vance had a single grandson who settled in Oak Haven in the mid-1960s, Richard Vance, a respected local contractor who passed away in 1998. Richard Vance had 2 biological sons. The elder son was Marcus Vance, born in 1968. Marcus had left Ohio in 1992 to join the United States Navy, eventually settling in San Diego, California, where he had lived continuously for 30 years. Official military deployment logs and federal payroll records confirmed that on October 14, 2005, Marcus Vance was serving as a chief petty officer aboard an aircraft carrier stationed in the Persian Gulf, an airtight, ironclad, multi-verified alibi. That left the younger son, Thomas Vance. Born on August 12, 1971, Thomas Vance was 52 years old in the summer of 2024. He was not a shadowy drifter passing through town on Highway 30. He was not a disgruntled outcast lurking in the woods. Thomas Vance was the sitting, long-serving mayor of Oak Haven, Ohio. Detective Wright sat frozen in his chair, staring at the high-resolution portrait of Mayor Thomas Vance displayed on his monitor. The handsome, silver-haired politician smiled back at him from the official city website, wearing a tailored dark suit, a crisp white shirt, and a gold lapel pin depicting the city seal of Oak Haven. This was the same man who, as a 34-year-old city councilman in November 2005, had organized the candlelight vigils for Clara Mercer. This was the man who had stood before news cameras, weeping publicly as he pledged a $10,000 reward from municipal funds to catch the monster who had executed her. This was the man who had shaken Chief David Miller's hand, who had hugged Clara's grieving sister on national television, and who had leveraged the community's collective trauma to launch a dominant 20-year political career. My God, Wright breathed, rubbing his face with trembling hands. He's been sitting in the mayor's office for 16 years. He's been walking past Clara's memorial bench every single morning. The genealogical science is indisputable, Jem, Dr. Reed said quietly, her voice heavy with the gravity of the realization. The male profile extracted from the rim of that white mug came from a son of Richard Vance. Marcus was in the Persian Gulf. Mathematically, biologically, legally, Thomas Vance is the only living human being who fits this genetic profile. Despite the overwhelming genealogical certainty, Detective Wright faced an immediate, profound legal barrier under Ohio criminal procedure. Investigative genetic genealogy provided extraordinary probable cause for an investigation, but a familial match from a commercial database like GEDmatch was legally insufficient to secure an arrest warrant for aggravated murder. The district attorney's office was uncompromising during a secret, late-night briefing at the Allen County Courthouse. To place handcuffs on the sitting mayor of Oak Haven, law enforcement needed a direct, one-to-one, physical DNA match between Thomas Vance's living biological tissue and the 19-year-old cellular profile recovered from the white coffee cup. If you approach Mayor Vance directly or serve a search warrant for a cheek swab without an ironclad match, District Attorney Karen Montgomery warned, leaning across the conference table, his legal defense team will have emergency injunctions filed in federal court before the swab even reaches the lab box. They will claim political persecution, attack the chain of custody of the 2005 evidence, and attempt to suppress the genomic profile. You need a surreptitious sample, Jim. You need him to discard his DNA voluntarily in a public space. On June 10, 2024, a covert, elite surveillance team from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, BCI, established a 24-hour tactical perimeter around Mayor Thomas Vance's home, his private vehicle, and the Oak Haven Municipal Building. Detective Wright commanded the field operation himself, operating from an unmarked black utility van parked 2 blocks from the mayor's residence. For 3 agonizing weeks, undercover officers followed Thomas Vance across Allen County. They watched him through long-distance telephoto lenses as he cut ribbons at new business openings, chaired city council meetings, attended charity dinners, and coached his son's Little League baseball team. Yet, Mayor Thomas Vance operated with a sharp, almost terrifying level of biological discipline. He never ate at open public restaurants where plastic cutlery or paper plates were used. When he dined at local steakhouses, his personal assistant immediately cleared his table settings, packing his glass stems and cloth napkins into a leather tote bag before restaurant staff could touch them. When he drank water or coffee in public, he utilized a custom stainless steel vacuum flask that he brought from home and kept locked inside his leather briefcase. He's hypervigilant, Jim, Detective Wright noted into his radio from the surveillance van on the rainy morning of June 28th. He's been living for 19 years with a deep, instinctual dread of leaving a single cell behind. He wipes his own microphone at press conferences. He carries his own trash out to his locked personal vehicle. He knows exactly what he left on Mill Creek Road in 2005. He thinks he's invisible, BCI agent Sarah Jenkins replied from a secondary position across from City Hall. He thinks because 19 years have passed, he's in the clear. But everybody makes a mistake eventually. That mistake occurred on the morning of July 2nd, 2024. A sudden, severe summer thunderstorm rolled across northern Ohio, drenching Oak Haven in sheets of gray, blinding rain that flooded the gutters and paralyzed morning commuter traffic. The heavy, dark atmosphere was an eerie, unsettling replica of the storm that had doused the town on October 14, 2005. At 8:30 a.m., Mayor Thomas Vance's black SUV pulled up to the curb outside a high-end artisanal coffee shop on Main Street. The mayor stepped out into the pouring rain, wearing a dark trench coat buttoned to his neck, holding a black umbrella overhead. Detective Wright watched through his rain-streaked windshield as Vance walked inside the coffee shop. Because the shop's automated dishwashing unit had suffered a mechanical breakdown earlier that morning, a handwritten sign posted on the front counter indicated that all beverages were being served exclusively in disposable paper cups with plastic sipping lids. Mayor Vance ordered a double espresso in a small paper cup. He paid with cash, declined a receipt, and walked over to a small corner table near the front window to wait for a regional transportation committee meeting scheduled across the street. Detective Wright pulled on a rain jacket, stepped out into the downpour, and slipped quietly through the front door of the shop, taking a seat at a table near the entrance, his phone held in his hand, as if he were checking email. For 8 tense minutes, Wright watched Mayor Thomas Vance out of the corner of his eye. The 52-year-old mayor sat drinking his espresso, watching the rain wash down Main Street. He raised the small paper cup to his lips, taking slow, deliberate sips. Wright watched the physical point of contact, Vance's lower lip pressing against the smooth cardboard rim, leaving behind invisible traces of moisture, saliva, and cellular tissue. It was the exact same physical act Thomas Vance had performed inside Clara Mercer's study 19 years earlier. Vance finished his espresso. He set the empty cup down on the table, pulled a linen handkerchief from his trench coat, wiped his mouth gently, and stood up. Instead of taking his disposable cup with him as he normally did with his stainless steel travel mug, Vance picked up the empty paper cup by its base, walked over to the recycling bin near the exit door, and dropped it into the open-top chute. He adjusted his trench coat, opened his umbrella, and stepped out into the pouring rain. The moment the front door closed behind the mayor, Detective Wright moved with lethal precision. He signaled to BCI Agent Jenkins, who stepped inside the doorway to block the view of the coffee shop staff. Wright pulled a pair of sterile nitrile gloves from his pocket, snapped them onto his hands, and reached into the top of the recycling bin. He picked up the small paper espresso cup by its lower cardboard edge, carefully avoiding the upper rim, where Vance's lips had rested seconds before. He placed the cup into an airtight, sterile biohazard container, sealed the latch, and wrote in bold black ink. Evidence Item JW 2024-0702 Surreptitious Sample Subject Vance Thomas Time 8:44 a.m. We have it, Wright whispered into his radio, his breath catching in his throat as he held the sealed container. The mug from 2005 just met its owner. The evidence container was placed in an insulated transport box and driven under emergency police escort directly to the State Genomics Lab in Columbus. Inside the lab, Dr. Eris Thorne's team extracted the fresh-touch DNA from the paper cup rim within hours. The living cellular profile was processed through automated thermal cyclers and loaded directly into a short-read comparative alignment matrix. At 4:15 p.m. on July 2, 2024, the Central Lab supercomputer completed the automated alignment. On the central digital monitor, 2 complex genomic sequencing graphs began to overlay each other in real time. Chromosome by chromosome, marker by marker, the green alignment bars locked into place across 2 million single nucleotide polymorphisms. A bright, flashing gold status banner illuminated the screen. Comparative genomic match confirmed. Subject identification: Vance Thomas. Statistical probability of single-source overlay: 1 in 420 trillion. False positive margin: 0.00000000001%. Dr. Eris Thorne turned around slowly from his terminal, looking at Detective James Wright. "It's him, Jim," Dr. Thorne said quietly, his voice steady and absolute. "The man who drank from that white ceramic mug in Clara Mercer's study on October 14, 2005, is Mayor Thomas Vance. The match is absolute." Detective Wright pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed District Attorney Karen Montgomery. "Karen," Wright said, his voice dropping to a hard, icy register. "Issue the warrant for aggravated murder. The 19-year storm is over. We're going to City Hall." The oppressive summer heat that followed the morning thunderstorm on July 2, 2024, hung over the brick plazas and manicured lawns of Oak Haven like a damp wool blanket. At 5:15 p.m., as the clock tower on the roof of the Oak Haven Municipal Building struck the quarter hour, the peaceful routine of the town shattered into absolute chaos. 6 black, unmarked SUVs swept through the iron gates of City Hall, their tires screeching against the asphalt, blue and red strobe lights flashing silently behind dark-tinted windshields. Tactical officers from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, wearing heavy body armor, helmet-mounted cameras, and dark uniforms emblazoned with gold state agents' patches, spilled across the stone steps. Leading the assault team was Detective James Wright, holding a sealed leather folder containing the arrest warrant for aggravated murder signed less than an hour earlier by a state Supreme Court judge. Inside the mayor's second-floor executive suite, the air was cool, quiet, and smelled of polished mahogany and expensive cologne. Mayor Thomas Vance sat behind his massive oak desk, reviewing municipal budget proposals for the upcoming fiscal year. He had removed his dark trench coat, revealing a tailored charcoal suit and a crisp silk tie. On the corner of his desk sat a framed photograph of his wife and 2 teenage children, alongside a brass commemorative clock presented to him by the Oakhaven Chamber of Commerce. The double doors of the executive suite were thrown open with a thunderous bang that rattled the glass-framed awards along the walls. Police. State agents. Don't move. Keep your hands where we can see them. The tactical team flooded the office, weapons raised, laser sights painting bright reds across the mahogany furniture. Mayor Vance jumped up from his leather armchair, his face instantly turning red with synthetic outrage, his hand slamming down onto the desk surface. "What in the hell is the meaning of this?" Vance shouted, his voice booming with the practiced authority of a 20-year political veteran. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am the mayor of this city. Lower those weapons immediately, or I will have every single one of your badges by nightfall." Detective Wright stepped through the line of tactical officers, walking slowly toward the desk until he stood less than 3 feet from the sitting mayor. Wright reached into his suit jacket, pulled out the arrest warrant, and laid it flat on top of the budget documents. "Thomas Vance," Wright said, his voice terrifyingly calm, devoid of anger or theatrical flair. "You are under arrest for the aggravated murder of Clara Mercer on October 14, 2005. For a brief, agonizing second, the room fell into absolute, suffocating silence. The color drained from Thomas Vance's face with terrifying speed, leaving his skin a sickly, ash-gray color. The furious, authoritative expression that had masked his features seconds before dissolved into a blank, hollow stare. His eyes darted toward Detective Wright, then down at the paper warrant resting on his desk, then toward the tactical officers surrounding his office. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably, a faint, violent quivering that he tried desperately to hide by pressing his palms against the oak desk.
You
have no right," Vance stammered, his booming voice suddenly breaking into a thin, raspy whisper. "This is a political hit, an outrage. You have nothing." "We have the white mug, Thomas," Wright interrupted softly, leaning down until his face was inches from the mayor's ear. "We have the espresso cup from Main Street this morning. 2 million genetic markers, Thomas. 1 in 420 trillion. Every cell remembers." As BCI agents stepped forward, grabbed Vance's wrists, and clicked heavy steel handcuffs around his arms behind his back, the 52-year-old mayor offered no physical resistance. The polished, charismatic leader who had ruled Oakhaven for 16 years seemed to collapse inwardly, his posture stooping, his head hanging low as he was escorted down the grand marble staircase of City Hall. Outside, a crowd of dozens of municipal employees, local news reporters, and citizens stood frozen in shock behind police barricades. Cameras flashed relentlessly as the mayor of Oakhaven, handcuffed, flanked by state agents, his suit jacket draped over his hands, was loaded into the back seat of an unmarked police cruiser. By 6 p.m., news of the arrest spread across the internet like a digital wildfire. Headlines across national and international news outlets read like scenes from a psychological horror thriller. Ohio town in shock. Mayor arrested for 2005 cold case execution. Genetic geography unmasks popular politician AS killer. The monster in City Hall. How a discarded coffee cup solved a 19-year murder. To the citizens of Oakhaven, The news was a devastating, psychological earthquake. People gathered on street corners, in diner booths, and on front porches, staring at television screens in disbelief. The man who had organized Clara Mercer's candlelight vigils, the man who had cried on local news, the man who had promised to protect their children, was the very monster who had bound Clara with zip ties and executed her in her own home. At 9 p.m., Detective Wright sat across a metal interrogation table from Thomas Vance inside the high-security processing facility at the Allen County Sheriff's Office. Vance sat flanked by two of the most expensive, high-powered criminal defense attorneys in the state of Ohio, led by senior trial counsel Richard Sterling. Vance sat in silence, his silk tie loosened, staring at the scarred wooden table. "Thomas," Wright began, placing a blue binder containing the 2005 crime scene photos and the modern genomic alignment reports onto the table. "The scientific evidence is ironclad. We know you were in that house on Mill Creek Road on October 14, 2005. We know you sat across from Clara. We know you drank from that white ceramic mug. What we want to know now is why. Why would a rising star on the city council execute a third-grade schoolteacher in cold blood?" Defense attorney Richard Sterling immediately raised a hand, stepping between Wright and his client. "My client will not be answering any questions regarding these unproven, speculative allegations, Detective. We will be filing emergency legal motions in federal court to challenge every aspect of this arrest, your illegal surveillance, and your non-validated genetic testing." Wright ignored the attorney entirely, keeping his eyes locked onto Thomas Vance. "You built an entire career on her grave, didn't you, Thomas?" Wright pressed, his voice hard as iron. "You used her murder to run for mayor. You stood on the municipal steps and wept for the cameras because it made you look like a hero. But you forgot one thing. You left your name on that mug. And no amount of political power can erase your own DNA." Vance slowly raised his head, looking at Detective Wright. His eyes were cold, hollow, devoid of the warmth and charisma he had displayed to the public for 2 decades. He didn't offer a defense. He didn't declare his innocence. He simply sat in silence, his jaw clenched, as his legal team demanded he be transferred to his holding cell. The indictment was officially handed down by an Allen County grand jury 4 days later, charging Thomas Vance with aggravated murder, aggravated burglary, and kidnapping, charges that carried a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or the death penalty under Ohio state law. On July 10, 2024, the formal arraignment took place inside a packed, suffocatingly tense courtroom at the Allen County Courthouse. Sitting in the front row of the public gallery was Clara Mercer's sister, Hannah, now 50 years old, her hair silver-streaked, holding hands with her husband. Beside her sat retired Chief David Miller, 82 years old, sitting upright in his suit, his eyes fixed on the defense table with an intense, unyielding hatred. When Thomas Vance was led into the courtroom wearing a dark orange inmate jumpsuit and leg irons, a heavy, collective gasp echoed through the room. The contrast between the pristine, suit-wearing politician they had seen on television for years and the handcuffed inmate stepping before the bench was staggering. District Attorney Karen Montgomery stood before the judge, her voice echoing through the silent room. "Your Honor," Montgomery declared, pointing toward the defense table, "for 19 years, the defendant, Thomas Vance, lived a double life of unimaginable deception. He committed a premeditated, brutal execution of an innocent woman and then utilized the resulting shock and terror of this community to propel himself into high political office. He used the victim's death as a stepping stone for his own ambition." Montgomery submitted the forensic genomic alignment reports to the court. The physical evidence against the defendant is unassailable. A direct single-source genomic match connects him to the crime scene mug with a statistical certainty of 1 in 420 trillion. Given the severity of the charges, the defendant's extraordinary access to financial resources, and the clear danger he poses to the integrity of this judicial process, the state requests that the defendant be remanded into custody without bail. Defense attorney Richard Sterling stood up, launching an aggressive counterargument. "Your Honor, this entire prosecution is a media-driven circus built on experimental, non-validated genetic guesswork. The police stalked my client, seized his discarded personal property without a valid Fourth Amendment warrant, and rushed to arrest a dedicated public servant. We intend to prove that the 2005 evidence was contaminated, mismanaged, and legally inadmissible. Judge Thomas Bradley looked down from the bench, his expression stern and unyielding. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Bradley said, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls, "the physical evidence and chain of custody documentation presented by the grand jury are exceptional. The application for bail is denied. The defendant will remain in the custody of the Allen County Sheriff pending trial." Bang! The gavel struck the hardwood block like a thunderclap. As court officers led Thomas Vance away toward the holding cells, he turned his head for a brief, fleeting moment. His eyes met those of Hannah Mercer sitting in the front row. Hannah didn't scream. She didn't cry out. She simply stood tall, her chin raised, looking into the eyes of her sister's killer with an unshakable, silent dignity that forced the disgraced mayor to look down at the floor in profound shame. The legal battle lines were officially drawn. The upcoming trial of the state of Ohio versus Thomas Vance was set to become one of the most explosive, highly watched criminal trials in modern American history, a legal showdown between a cold-blooded political psychopath and the unstoppable, microscopic truth of modern science. The autumn of 2024 transformed the quiet county seat of Lima, Ohio, where the Allen County Courthouse stood as a massive granite monument to 19th-century justice, into a frantic, international media circus. Every morning before dawn, satellite broadcast vans lined the perimeter of the courthouse square, their high-gain dishes tilted toward the gray sky, beaming live updates across the globe. Inside courtroom 302, beneath tall stained-glass windows depicting scales of justice, the pretrial evidentiary hearings for the state of Ohio versus Thomas Vance unfolded with relentless, brutal intensity. At the defense table, Thomas Vance sat stripped of his executive stature. Months in solitary confinement at the Allen County Correction Center had taken a visible toll. His manicured silver hair had grown long and thin, his skin held the sickly paleness of concrete cells, and his expensive suits now hung loosely off his stooped frame. Yet his defense team, funded by liquidations of his personal real estate holdings, fought with a desperate, cornered aggression. Lead defense counsel Richard Sterling launched an all-out assault on the core foundation of the prosecution's case, the admissibility of investigative genetic genealogy and the surreptitious DNA collection from the Main Street coffee shop. For 3 days during the preliminary suppression hearings, Sterling called independent bioethicists and academic geneticists to the witness stand, attempting to create reasonable doubt in the mind of Judge Thomas Bradley. Dr. Eris Thorne, Sterling shouted during his cross-examination of the state's lead geneticist, stepping right up to the partition of the witness box, "You admit that touch DNA recovered from porous ceramic surfaces degrades over time, correct?" "Chemical degradation occurs, yes," Dr. Thorne answered calmly from the stand, adjusting his glasses. "Thermal fluctuations, humidity, and atmospheric exposure break long-chain nuclear DNA into smaller base pair fragments. And to make sense of those broken, degraded fragments," Sterling pressed, turning dramatically toward the gallery, "your laboratory utilized proprietary, non-public algorithms to reconstruct what you claim is my client's genetic profile. Isn't it true that your computer software essentially filled in the blanks where original genetic data was missing?" "That is a fundamental misunderstanding of computational alignment," Dr. Thorne countered firmly, his voice steady and resolute. "We do not invent data. We align short-read sequencing fragments across millions of known reference points. The statistical overlay between the 2005 sample and Mr. Vance's 2024 discarded sample achieved an absolute single-source match across 2 million single nucleotide polymorphisms. A match derived from trash," Sterling countered, slamming a fist onto his podium. "A paper cup pulled illegally from a public waste bin without a search warrant signed by a judge. The police violated my client's Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable search and seizure." District Attorney Karen Montgomery stood up slowly, calmly buttoning her charcoal blazer as she addressed the court. "Your Honor, Montgomery argued, her voice ringing clear through the vaulted room. Binding precedents set by the United States Supreme Court in California versus Greenwood and reinforced across dozens of state Supreme Court rulings regarding abandoned property are crystal clear. When an individual knowingly disposes of an item in a public waste receptacle accessible to any member of the general public, they forfeit any reasonable expectation of privacy under the Fourth Amendment. The police acted within absolute legal boundaries. On October 18, 2024, Judge Bradley issued his formal, written ruling. Denying every single defense motion to suppress, the judge ruled that both the investigative genetic genealogy pipeline and the surreptitious DNA collection met the highest legal and scientific standards of admissibility. The trial of Thomas Vance was officially ordered to proceed to a jury. The formal murder trial opened on January 7, 2025. For 4 weeks, District Attorney Karen Montgomery and Detective James Wright laid out a methodical, devastating web of circumstantial, financial, and physical evidence that shattered the defense's narrative of Thomas Vance as an innocent, dedicated public servant. First, the prosecution exposed the long-buried financial motive that had led to Clara Mercer's execution on October 14, 2005. Through subpoenaed bank records, state ethics commission filings, and real estate ledgers dating back 20 years, prosecutors proved that in the autumn of 2005, then City Councilman Thomas Vance was secretly embezzling over $180,000 from a municipal economic development fund. Vance had used the stolen cash to cover massive personal gambling debts incurred at offshore casinos and to fund his initial mayoral exploratory committee. Clara Mercer, in her role as a volunteer treasurer for the Oak Haven Municipal Arts Council, had accidentally stumbled upon the fraudulent wire transfers while auditing joint city school district bank accounts in early October 2005. Clara Mercer wasn't just a beloved schoolteacher, District Attorney Montgomery told the jury during her opening presentation, displaying bank ledgers on giant digital screens. She was a woman of uncompromising integrity. On October 12, 2005, 48 hours before her murder, Clara called the state auditor's hotline from her home phone, requesting an official review of the city council's development funds. The courtroom fell into an icy silence. Thomas Vance found out about that phone call, Montgomery continued, pointing a finger directly at the disgraced mayor. He knew that if the state auditor launched an investigation, his embezzlement would be exposed, his political career would be obliterated, and he would face decades in a state penitentiary. So he made a cold, calculated decision to eliminate the threat. Second, the prosecution called forensic pathologists and BCI field agents who detailed the sickening precision of the execution itself. They showed the jury the heavy-duty industrial zip ties recovered from Clara's wrists. A supply chain expert testified that 3 days before the murder, Thomas Vance had purchased identical heavy-duty zip ties and work gloves using cash at a hardware store 2 towns over in Wapakoneta, Ohio, a purchase recorded on grainy, archived security video that investigators had unearthed in late 2024. Then came the emotional peak of the prosecution's case, the physical evidence of the coffee mug. Detective James Wright took the witness stand, holding up a clear, bulletproof glass display case containing the original white ceramic coffee mug, catalog number 05-8821B. Members of the jury, Detective Wright testified, looking directly into the eyes of the 12 citizens in the box. Thomas Vance thought he committed the perfect crime. He bought his supplies with cash, he wore gloves, he wiped the handles of this cup, and he walked out into a rainstorm that he believed washed away his sins. But he didn't realize that the human mouth leaves an eternal signature. When his lips touched the rim of this cup, while sitting in Clara's study, he signed his own arrest warrant. The defense, realizing their legal arguments were failing, made a desperate, high-risk tactical gamble during their closing defense presentation. They put Thomas Vance himself on the witness stand. It was an extraordinary, high-stakes moment. On February 3, 2025, 53-year-old Thomas Vance walked slowly to the witness box, taking the oath with a trembling right hand. Under direct examination by Richard Sterling, Vance offered a practiced, soft-spoken, emotional narrative. He acknowledged that he knew Clara Mercer and admitted that he had visited her Victorian house on Mill Creek Road, but claimed under oath that he had gone there on the evening of October 13th, the night before the murder, to discuss mundane municipal budget requests for her third-grade classroom. Did you shoot Clara Mercer on the morning of October 14th, 2005, Thomas? Richard Sterling asked softly, his voice full of paternal warmth. Vance looked at the jury, tears welling in his pale blue eyes, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. No, sir. On my life, on the memory of my family, I did not. Clara was my friend, a pillar of our community. I sat in her study on the evening of the 13th. She served me a cup of coffee. We talked for 20 minutes about school supplies, and I left. She was completely fine when I walked out that door. Someone else must have come into her home the next morning and committed this horrific act. It was a clever, plausible story designed to explain the presence of his touch DNA on the coffee mug without admitting to the execution. Then stood up District Attorney Karen Montgomery for cross-examination. She walked slowly toward the podium, holding a single, yellowed, 20-year-old document, the original 2005 crime scene report written by the state forensic medical examiner. Mr. Vance, Montgomery began, her voice deceptively quiet. You just testified under sworn oath to this jury that you were inside Clara Mercer's study on the evening of October 13th, 2005. Is that your testimony? Yes, ma'am, Vance replied, leaning toward the microphone, trying desperately to maintain his composed, dignified demeanor. It was the evening before. Mr. Vance, Montgomery continued, stepping closer to the witness stand, her eyes flashing with lethal intensity. The coffee found inside that white ceramic mug, the very coffee you drank from, contained fresh, liquid cinnamon creamer and 2 teaspoons of raw cane sugar. Is that correct? I take creamer and sugar in my coffee, yes, Vance stammered, frowning slightly. Montgomery picked up a large digital display board and turned it toward the jury. Mr. Vance, crime scene photographs and toxicological reports prove that the coffee pot in Clara Mercer's kitchen was brewed fresh at approximately 6 a.m. on the morning of October 14th. Furthermore, shipping invoices prove that Clara purchased that specific brand of cinnamon creamer at the Oak Haven grocery store at 7:15 p.m. on the evening of October 13th, nearly 2 hours after you claim you left her house. She slammed the display board onto the prosecution table with a thunderous crash that made the entire courtroom jump. If you were in that house on the afternoon of the 13th, Mr. Vance, how did you drink fresh coffee containing creamer that wasn't even bought at the grocery store until hours later? Thomas Vance froze. His face turned a deep, mottled red, then drained to a ghostly, deathly white. His mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air. He looked frantically toward his legal defense table, but Richard Sterling sat with his head bowed, completely unable to shield his client from the crushing weight of his exposed lie. You weren't there on the 13th, were you, Thomas? Montgomery pressed relentlessly, stepping right up to the witness stand, her voice echoing like a thunderclap through the courtroom. You walked through her back door on the morning of October 14th with a concealed 9mm pistol and industrial zip ties in your pocket. You sat in her armchair, drank her coffee, and when she refused to remain silent about your embezzlement, you tied her down and executed her. Vance buried his trembling face in his hands, shaking uncontrollably, completely unable to utter a single word of defense. The wall of lies that had protected him for 19 years had collapsed in real time before the eyes of the jury. On February 12, 2025, after less than 2 hours of jury deliberation, the court bailiff delivered the folded verdict sheet to the judge. The silence in courtroom 302 was absolute. In the matter of the state of Ohio versus Thomas Vance, the clerk read aloud, on the count of aggravated murder, how do you find? Foreperson Marcus Vance, no relation, a retired high school teacher from Allen County, stood upright in the jury box. Guilty. A sharp, collective gasp swept through the packed gallery, instantly followed by a deep, wrenching sob from Clara Mercer's sister, Hannah, who collapsed against her husband's shoulder. Judge Thomas Bradley looked down from the bench, his expression stern and unyielding. Thomas Vance, Judge Bradley declared, his voice echoing into every corner of the silent room. You executed a beloved woman to cover up your financial crimes, and for nearly 2 decades, you walked this earth as a free man, exploiting her death for your own political gain. You are a cold, unrepentant predator. Judge Bradley raised his gavel. For the crime of aggravated murder, I sentence you to life imprisonment at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, without the possibility of parole. You will die behind iron bars. Court is adjourned.
Bang!
The gavel struck the hardwood block, bringing a definitive, legal end to a 19-year nightmare. As court officers stepped forward, pulling Vance to his feet and snapping heavy iron chains around his waist and ankles, he turned his head for a brief, fleeting second. He looked at Detective James Wright and retired Chief David Miller sitting in the front row. They didn't look back at him with hatred or vengeance. They simply looked at him with the quiet, unshakable satisfaction of justice fulfilled. Outside on the granite steps of the courthouse, beneath a clear winter sky, Detective Wright stood before a wall of global media microphones. Flanking him was Hannah Mercer. Today's verdict, Detective Wright declared to the world, sends a permanent message across time. There is no political title, no passage of time, and no wiped coffee mug that can protect a killer from the light of modern science. To every family sitting in cold grief waiting for an answer, do not lose hope. The science is coming. Justice is coming. The execution of Clara Mercer was no longer a cold case. The white ceramic coffee mug was returned to its permanent place of honor in the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation Historical Museum, a silent, timeless monument to the reality that no matter how deep the secret, no matter how cold the storm, the truth will always find its way home. The spring of 2025 arrived across the rolling farmland of Allen County with a quiet, cathartic stillness. The suffocating circus of media satellite vans that had choked the streets surrounding the courthouse in Lima slowly packed away their equipment and scattered to new headlines, leaving the town of Oak Haven to face the long, heavy process of collective healing. For 19 years, the community had lived under a dual psychological horror. They had mourned a beloved third-grade teacher whose life was stolen in her own home, and for 16 of those years, they had looked to their charismatic young mayor as the steady pillar of their resilience. Unmasking Thomas Vance, exposing the terrifying truth that the man who led their candlelight vigils and ran their municipal government was the very assassin who bound Clara Mercer with industrial zip ties, had shaken the civic identity of Oak Haven to its absolute core. Inside the Oak Haven Municipal Building, the physical traces of Vance's 16-year administration were quietly erased. His grand oak desk in the executive suite was removed and replaced. His official portraits were taken down from the city council chamber walls and archived into police evidence storage, and a thorough independent forensic audit of all municipal accounts was launched by the Ohio State Auditor's Office. The audit revealed a staggering paper trail of corruption. Over $300,000 had been systematically siphoned from city funds between 2004 and 2022 to cover Vance's secret gambling debts, personal investments, and hush money payments to offshore shell accounts. The motive that had led to Clara Mercer's death on that rain-slicked October morning in 2005 was officially, permanently documented in state financial archives. On a warm afternoon in late April 2025, a small, dignified gathering took place in the central courtyard of Oak Haven Elementary School. The sun shone brightly through the budding branches of oak trees, illuminating a brand-new, hand-carved stone memorial fountain built beside Clara Mercer's original wooden bench. Gathered around the water fountain were dozens of former students, now young adults in their 20s, alongside faculty members, town residents, and Clara's sister, Hannah. Standing beside Hannah was Detective James Wright, dressed in a sharp dark suit, his gold detective badge gleaming in the spring sunlight. For nearly 2 decades, Hannah, Detective Wright said gently, his voice carrying a warm, quiet peace as he looked at the clear water cascading over the granite basin. This town was forced to remember Clara through the lens of a dark mystery. People looked at Mill Creek Road and thought of a cold case, a yellow police tape, an unsolved horror. Today, that shadow is gone forever. When people look at this water, they don't think of Thomas Vance or a court trial. They think of a woman who dedicated her life to teaching children how to read, how to be kind, and how to stand up for what is right. Hannah reached out, placing her hand gently on the cool granite stone, her eyes filled with tears of pure, unadulterated relief. When the verdict was read in that courtroom, "Detective," Hannah whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "it felt like I could finally take a full, deep breath for the first time since October 2005. My sister didn't die in vain. She stood up to a corrupt man, and through this incredible science, she reached out from the dark to make sure he was held accountable." While Oak Haven healed, the landmark conviction of the state of Ohio versus Thomas Vance was generating seismic, permanent waves throughout the global legal, forensic, and academic communities. At prestigious law schools from Harvard and Yale to Stanford and the University of Chicago, the transcript of the Vance trial was immediately incorporated into core constitutional law curricula as the definitive precedent on the intersection of Fourth Amendment privacy rights, investigative genetic genealogy, and abandoned physical DNA evidence. Legal scholars published dozens of peer-reviewed articles analyzing how the NYPD's earlier precedents on deep-read genomic alignment and the Allen County Sheriff's Office's execution of surreptitious DNA collection from the Main Street coffee shop had created an unassailable legal blueprint. The trial established once and for all that a defendant's subjective attempt to hide their identity behind wealth, high political office, or a wiped porcelain cup could not override the objective, mathematical reality of modern computational genetics. Across the United States and Europe, federal law enforcement agencies moved rapidly to standardize the Mercer-Vance pipeline. The United States Department of Justice announced the establishment of a dedicated national task force designed to provide federal grant funding and high-speed genomic alignment sequencing to municipal police departments handling unsolved violent homicides dating from the late 20th century. In crime laboratories from Seattle to Miami and from London to Berlin, historical evidence lockers were unlocked. Thousands of sealed cardboard boxes containing degraded, decades-old physical evidence, discarded cigarette butts, dried blood spots on vintage clothing, weapon handles, and ancient ceramic coffee mugs were pulled from dusty metal shelves. The invisible phantoms who had committed violent atrocities in the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, believing that time, chemical degradation, and the limitations of 20th century forensic science had granted them permanent immunity, suddenly found themselves pursued by supercomputers capable of mapping family trees across generations. Meanwhile, 80 miles south of Allen County, inside the formidable concrete perimeter of the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, the daily reality of inmate number A812-094 was governed by the cold, unyielding mechanics of maximum security state incarceration. Arthur Vance Jr. had met his fate in New York, and now Thomas Vance faced the exact same grim reality in Ohio. At 53 years old, inmate Thomas Vance occupied an 8-by-10-foot solitary cell in Cell Block C. The tailor dark suits, silk ties, custom leather shoes, and mahogany executive suites of Oak Haven were gone, replaced by a coarse orange canvas jumpsuit, heavy rubber-soled slip-on shoes, and a narrow steel bunk bolted directly into a reinforced concrete wall. Every morning at 5 o'clock, as the deafening metallic buzzers echoed down the long, cold concrete corridors, Vance was forced to stand by his heavy steel cell door for the morning roll call. His physical appearance had transformed completely during his months of post-conviction confinement. His manicured silver hair had been shaved close to his scalp by prison barbers, his shoulders were heavily stooped, and his once booming voice had quieted into a hollow, defeated rasp. The arrogant, manipulative politician who had once addressed thousands of cheering citizens at campaign rallies and commanded the municipal government of an entire town was now just another numerical entry in the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction database. He spent his daily 1-hour exercise period walking slowly in a small, wire-caged outdoor yard surrounded by 30-foot concrete walls and armed watchtowers. He held no status among the inmate population. His identity as a disgraced politician and a convicted murderer of a beloved schoolteacher made him a permanent target of hostility, forcing prison administrators to keep him under continuous administrative protective custody. He received no family visits. His wife had filed for divorce immediately following his indictment, legally changing her surname and moving her teenage children to an undisclosed state far from the media glare of the Midwest. His former political allies, business associates, and social acquaintances had scrubbed his name from municipal records and private clubs, eager to erase any association with a convicted assassin. His personal assets had been completely frozen, liquidated by court order, and redirected to satisfy court fines, legal fees, and a multi-million-dollar wrongful death civil judgment awarded directly to Hannah Mercer as the sole surviving heir of Clara's estate. Yet every Thursday afternoon during mail call, a single piece of correspondence arrived at his cell block. It was an unsealed, plain manila envelope containing typed press releases from the Ohio Attorney General's office, announcements detailing newly solved cold cases across the state that had been brought to justice using the exact same investigative genetic genealogy framework that had unmasked him on Main Street. At the bottom of every page, printed in bold, dark ink, was a single, haunting sentence. Every cell remembers. Vance never responded to the mail. He would sit on the edge of his steel bunk under the dim fluorescent nightlight, his trembling hands holding the paper, reading about other killers whose decades of freedom had been dismantled by microscopic traces of their own biological blueprints. He would fold the paper into a small square, set it on his stainless steel shelf, and stare blankly at the cold concrete wall before him until the morning wake-up buzzer sounded. In early June 2025, a quiet, solemn ceremony took place inside the main auditorium of the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation headquarters in London, Ohio. Before an audience of state troopers, forensic scientists, federal marshals, and county prosecutors, the Ohio Attorney General stepped up to the podium. Standing beside him were Detective James Wright, Dr. Eris Thorne, and retired Chief David Miller. Today, the Attorney General declared, his voice resonating through the auditorium, the state of Ohio recognizes 3 extraordinary individuals with the Distinguished Law Enforcement Service Medal. Through their unwavering dedication, brilliant scientific vision, and relentless refusal to let an old case die in the dark, Detective James Wright, Dr. Eris Thorne, and Chief David Miller did not merely solve a 19-year-old homicide that had haunted Allen County. They helped usher in a new era of global criminal justice. The audience stood and erupted into prolonged applause. Sitting in the front row of the gallery was Hannah Mercer, clapping with tears streaming down her face, looking at the 3 men who had refused to give up on her sister. When Detective James Wright stepped up to the microphone, he didn't give a speech about political victory, advanced algorithms, or high-speed sequencers. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a faded, yellowed photograph, the original 2005 crime scene photograph displaying the plain white ceramic coffee mug sitting on Clara Mercer's desk. Science did not solve this case in a vacuum, Detective Wright said into the microphone, his voice carrying a deep, quiet authority that hushed the room. Technology is simply a tool. This case was solved because Clara Mercer's life had profound meaning. It was solved because Chief David Miller refused to throw away a case file when he retired. It was solved because a family kept faith, and because law enforcement never forgets a victim. Wright looked directly at Hannah Mercer in the front row. To every killer who thinks he can wait out the clock, wipe his fingerprints, and build a pristine life behind a lie, listen very carefully, Wright continued, his voice ringing out like a judgment bell. You can run, you can hide behind political power, and you can pretend to be a pillar of the community. But your time is up. Your DNA is a clock that never stops ticking. Science is coming for you, and justice will always bring you home. As the press conference ended and the reporters filed out into the afternoon air, Detective Wright walked out onto the front steps of the BCI building alongside retired Chief David Miller. The old chief walked slowly, leaning on his wooden cane, but his eyes were bright, clear, and unburdened for the first time in 20 years. You did it, Jimmy, Chief Miller said, stopping on the steps and looking out at the green Ohio landscape. You kept the promise I couldn't keep. We did it together, Chief, Wright replied, placing a hand on the old man's shoulder. The mug finally spoke. The long, painful narrative of the 2005 Oak Haven coffee cup murder had reached its ultimate, unshakable conclusion. The footsteps in the autumn rain had vanished, The blood on the floorboards had been cleansed, and the thick cardboard evidence box 05-8821B was officially sealed into the permanent historical archives of the state of Ohio. The story of Clara Mercer and the revolutionary scientific journey that unmasked a town's mayor to speak for a fallen teacher remained as an eternal, glowing beacon. It stood as a quiet, powerful promise to every grieving family waiting in the dark, and a timeless, inescapable warning to every killer hiding in the shadows. No matter how high you rise, no matter how clean you wipe the glass, and no matter how many years pass in silence, the truth will always find its way home. By the autumn of 2025, a profound and lasting silence had settled over the quiet, tree-lined streets of Oak Haven, Ohio. The heavy, dark fog that had shrouded Mill Creek Road for 2 decades had completely lifted, replaced by the crisp, golden light of an Indian summer. The Victorian house where Clara Mercer had taken her last breath stood bathed in the warm afternoon sun, its gray porch freshly painted, its garden blooming with white chrysanthemums planted by the new owners in quiet honor of the woman who had lived there before them. Inside the Allen County Sheriff's Office in Lima, the atmosphere in the cold case unit had undergone a total transformation. What had once been a dark, cramped basement storage room filled with dusty cardboard boxes and stagnant files was now a state-of-the-art regional task force center known as the Mercer Vance Forensic Unit. Mounted on the central wall of the unit was a large, polished brass plaque engraved with Clara Mercer's name, set beneath a quote taken from Detective James Wright's closing statement at the BCI headquarters. No matter how clean you wipe the glass, the truth will always find its way home. On a cool October afternoon, Detective Wright sat at his clean oak desk, reviewing modern forensic intake files. Beside him sat a steaming mug of black coffee. Opposite his desk sat Assistant District Attorney Karen Montgomery, holding a thick legal binder containing final appellate filings. Federal public defenders filed their final response on the habeas petition this morning, Jim, Montgomery said, leaning back in her chair and taking off her reading glasses. Judge Bradley's rulings on the Fourth Amendment surreptitious collection from the coffee shop were affirmed across the board by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court officially denied cert. Thomas Vance has exhausted every single legal avenue available to him under state and federal law. Wright picked up his coffee mug, taking a slow sip as he looked at the brass plaque on the wall. He's never leaving Lucasville, Karen. Not alive, Montgomery replied firmly. His conviction stands as an unassailable precedent. Every federal district in the Sixth Circuit now cites State v. Vance as the gold standard framework for surreptitious DNA collection in public spaces. She tapped her finger on the binder. In fact, Jem, Montgomery continued, her eyes lighting up with professional pride, the Ohio Supreme Court just released its annual judicial report. The legal architecture established during Vance's trial has already been cited in over 40 cold case indictments across the Midwest. Prosecuting cold-blooded predators who hid behind decades of silence is no longer an uphill battle, it's an organized, methodical machine. While the legal precedents cemented the case into modern American jurisprudence, the scientific wave generated by the white ceramic coffee mug continued to crest across international borders. In late November 2025, Dr. Eris Thorne addressed the International Congress of Forensic Genetics in Geneva, Switzerland. Standing before 2,000 elite molecular biologists, forensic pathologists, and law enforcement directors from 50 nations, Dr. Thorne presented a detailed case study on the 600x deep read alignment methodology utilized in case 05-8821B. On a giant digital projection screen behind him, Dr. Thorne displayed a high-definition 3D rendering of the white ceramic mug, showing the exact microporous glazed surface, where microscopic epithelial skin cells had clung through 19 years of storage. For nearly 20 years, Dr. Thorne explained to the global audience, his voice echoing through the massive convention hall, the world believed that touch DNA recovered from non-porous or semi-porous evidence was a fleeting, temporary biological witness, something that eroded beyond utility after a few years of degradation. The Mercer Vance case dismantled that misconception forever. He pointed to the glowing digital matrix of 2 million single nucleotide polymorphisms. What we demonstrated in Ohio is that human cellular material locked within the microcracks of ceramic or glass glaze is virtually immortal under basic climate control. The human lip does not merely leave a smear, it leaves an eternal genomic blueprint. With quantum-assisted short-read alignment, we can read that blueprint regardless of whether it sat in an evidence locker for 19 years, 50 years, or a century. The era of the undetected cold case is officially dead. Following the Congress, international law enforcement consortia, including Europol and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, formally adopted the Oakhaven Protocol for re-examining unsolved homicides involving historical physical touch evidence. In London, Scotland Yard opened a dedicated genomic pipeline to reprocess thousands of evidence items from cold cases dating back to the late 1960s. In Tokyo, the National Police Agency established a specialized investigative genetic genealogy unit modeled directly after the Allen County Task Force. The white coffee mug from a small Ohio town had become the catalyst for an unprecedented global revolution in human justice. Back in Oakhaven, the personal lives touched by the murder found a deep, quiet sanctuary of peace. On a chilly December morning, Hannah Mercer stood in the kitchen of her home on the outskirts of town, preparing breakfast for her family. Through the window, she watched the first quiet snow of the winter falling softly over the rolling fields, dusting the pine trees in a clean blanket of white. For 19 years, winter had brought a cold, suffocating ache to her heart, a constant, brutal reminder of the rain-slicked morning when her sister's life was violently stolen. But as she watched the snowflakes drift through the clear morning air, she felt no pain. She felt only a serene, radiant warmth. Her cell phone chimed on the kitchen counter. She picked it up to see a photograph sent by her 21-year-old daughter, Clara, named in honor of the aunt she had never had the chance to meet. The photo showed young Clara standing inside a brightly lit university classroom in Columbus, wearing a white lab coat, holding a bachelor's degree in molecular genetics. Beneath the photo was a simple text message for Aunt Clara. "We turned the dark into light." Hannah pressed the phone to her chest, tears of profound, peaceful joy streaming down her cheeks as she looked out at the falling snow. The darkness had been defeated. The lie had been destroyed. 80 miles away, inside the cold, concrete confines of the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, inmate Thomas Vance sat on his narrow steel bunk as the pale morning light filtered through the narrow, wire-reinforced window of his solitary cell. At 54 years old, the former mayor of Oakhaven was a hollow ghost of the charismatic politician who had once commanded city council meetings and addressed national news cameras. His hands trembled constantly from progressive neurological stress, his posture was permanently stooped, and his voice was reduced to a faint, gravelly whisper. He watched the snow falling outside his window, falling over the concrete walls, the razor wire fences, and the guard towers. Inmate Vance picked up a small, worn piece of newspaper from his nightstand. It was a clipping from a local Ohio paper featuring a small article about the inauguration of Oakhaven's new mayor, a soft-spoken woman who had pledged complete transparency, fiscal integrity, and community healing. In the background of the news photo, sitting quietly on the front steps of City Hall, was the bronze memorial plaque honoring Clara Mercer. Vance closed his eyes slowly. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't write letters to the appellate courts. He simply sat in the freezing quiet of his 6-by-8-foot cell, surrounded by the eternal, unyielding silence of his own choices. He had tried to play God in a third-grade teacher's study on a rain-slicked morning in 2005. He had executed a woman to protect his stolen money, wiped his coffee cup clean, and built a 16-year political empire on top of her grave. But in the end, the very lips he used to kiss his voters and drink his luxury espresso had betrayed him to a microscopic world he could neither see nor control. As the sun set over the snow-covered fields of Ohio, casting long, amber shadows across the granite facade of the Allen County Courthouse, Detective James Wright walked down the stone steps into the crisp evening air. He pulled his collar up against the cold wind, looking up at the clear, starlit winter sky above Oakhaven. The city lights burned soft and yellow in the snow. Doors were locked, porch lights were lit, and families sat together in warmth and safety. The phantom of Mill Creek Road was gone. The white mug had spoken, the truth had been vindicated, and the town of Oak Haven was finally, permanently at peace. The transition into the midsummer of 2026 brought a steady, sweltering heat wave across the American Midwest, turning the cornfields of Allen County into vast, rustling seas of deep green under a cloudless turquoise sky. Yet inside the climate-controlled, concrete and glass vault of the Mercer Vance Forensic Unit in Lima, the temperature remained fixed at a sterile, razor-sharp 66 degrees. What had begun as a desperate, 19-year-old cold case investigation into a discarded white ceramic mug had evolved into an unstoppable, highly organized machine of modern American justice. The Regional Task Force was no longer merely maintaining the memory of Clara Mercer. It had become the primary tactical nerve center for cold case genomics across 5 neighboring states. Inside the central control bay, giant wall-mounted monitors displayed real-time computational feeds from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's supercomputing cluster. Over 200 open, cold case homicide files, stretching from the industrial river towns of eastern Ohio to the rural counties of southern Indiana and Michigan, were being systematically processed through the exact deep-read alignment pipeline that had unmasked Mayor Thomas Vance. Detective James Wright stood at the elevated glass partition overlooking the sequencing bay, holding a fresh mug of black coffee. Beside him stood Dr. Eris Thorne, who had just returned from advising the Federal Bureau of Investigation on the integration of quantum-assisted single nucleotide polymorphism mapping into the National Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICIG. "Look at those processing queues, Eris," Detective Wright said quietly, gesturing toward the cascading streams of green genetic data on the wall displays. 2 years ago, you and I were sitting in a dark basement room arguing over whether 10 degraded skin cells on a glazed ceramic rim could survive a single enzymatic wash. Today, precinct detectives from Cleveland to Cincinnati are running century-old touch evidence through this pipeline like it's standard fingerprint dusting. Dr. Thorne took a sip from his own cup, a reflective, quiet smile touching his lips. "It was never just about the technology, Jim," Dr. Thorne replied, his voice rich with quiet authority. "What the Mercer case proved to the legal and scientific world is that human biology operates on an eternal timetable. Physical tissue degrades, blood dries, paper rots, and memory fades. But the information sequence encoded within human base pairs is immutable. Time isn't a shelter for a murderer anymore. It's just a mathematical variable." Dr. Thorne tapped the glass partition, pointing to a high-speed sequencer humming in the sterile bay below. "In the last 12 months alone," Dr. Thorne continued, "the Oak Haven Protocol has produced ironclad, single-source genomic matches in 74 unsolved cold cases across the Great Lakes region. We've identified serial offenders who operated along the interstate corridors in the 1980s, resolved 40-year-old missing persons cases, and delivered final answers to families who had spent decades living in suffocating, silent grief. Every single one of those indictments traces its lineage back to the rain-slicked morning on Mill Creek Road. While the scientific revolution sparked by the case continued to expand, the legal and administrative realities in Allen County settled into a permanent, unshakable stability. At the Allen County Prosecutor's Office, District Attorney Karen Montgomery stood before her window overlooking the courtyard of the county courthouse. Her office had become a national destination for visiting state attorneys general, federal prosecutors, and legal scholars seeking to study the evidentiary chain of custody protocols developed for State versus Vance. A soft knock sounded at her door, and Assistant District Attorney Marcus Miller, a brilliant 30-year-old prosecutor who had joined the team during the pre-trial hearings, stepped inside holding a fresh legal brief. "Got a moment, Karen?" Miller asked respectfully. "Always, Marcus. What do you have?" Miller set the brief on her oak desk. It was an indictment draft for a 1989 unsolved homicide of a young gas station clerk in neighboring Auglaize County. "We completed the 600x deep read alignment on the suspect's discarded leather glove this morning," Miller explained, his eyes burning with quiet intensity. "Pulled a pristine 2 million SNP profile. Uploaded it to the genealogical network 3 hours ago. We already have a primary familial anchor pointing directly to a retired commercial truck driver living in Florida." Karen Montgomery picked up the brief, reading through the scientific attachments with a deep, serene sense of professional fulfillment. 37 years, she murmured softly. Another family that doesn't have to carry the weight of unanswered questions into another winter. I wanted you to sign the indictment first, Karen, Miller said softly. Because every time we file one of these motions now, every time we force an old crime scene to yield its secrets, we know who laid the brickwork. Clara Mercer's name isn't just on a bronze plaque in Oakhaven. It's embedded into the foundational bedrock of American jurisprudence. Karen signed her name in crisp blue ink at the bottom of the indictment, her hand steady, her heart filled with quiet pride. Take it to the grand jury, Marcus. Let's bring another one home. Meanwhile, 80 miles south in the rolling, heavily guarded hills of Scioto County, the physical reality of inmate Thomas Vance was drawing toward its quiet, inevitable conclusion. Inside the solitary medical infirmary of the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, inmate number A812-094 lay in a narrow steel hospital bed, his frail body hooked up to a digital pulse oximeter and a slow-drip intravenous line. At 54 years old, the former mayor of Oakhaven had been ravaged by advanced, rapidly progressing neuromuscular failure brought on by years of severe, unyielding psychological stress and absolute social isolation. His physical universe had contracted to 4 pale gray concrete walls, the rhythmic, electronic hum of medical monitors, and the heavy leather boots of correction officers standing guard outside his iron-reinforced door. The custom suits, the executive authority, the political rallies, and the multi-million-dollar real estate holdings had dissolved into ancient, meaningless dust. He was attended every morning by the prison chief medical officer, Dr. Harrison, who reviewed his chart and checked his blood pressure. On a humid Tuesday morning in late July 2026, as Dr. Harrison reached down to adjust the foredrip, Thomas Vance opened his sunken, pale blue eyes. His breathing was heavy, raspy, each breath an agonizing effort against his failing lungs. "Doctor," Vance whispered, his voice reduced to a dry, barely audible rustle of wind through dry leaves. Dr. Harrison leaned down closer to the bed. "I'm here, Thomas. Keep your breathing steady." Vance stared up at the blank white ceiling tiles, his clouded eyes fixed on a tiny water stain in the corner. "The coffee shop," he rasped, his spotted, thin hands trembling against the coarse, white hospital sheet. "On Main Street." I threw the paper cup away, right into the bin. I held it by the bottom cardboard edge. I was so careful. Dr. Harrison looked at the dying man with a calm, solemn expression, devoid of malice or sympathy, recording the clinical observation on his clipboard. "You were careful for 19 years, Thomas," Dr. Harrison said quietly, his voice echoing softly in the sterile room. "But human cells don't lie, and science doesn't forget. You signed your name in Clara Mercer's study in 2005. You just didn't know the world would learn how to read it." Thomas Vance turned his head slowly toward the small, barred window that looked out over the high concrete perimeter wall of the prison yard. He closed his eyes as a long, ragged sigh escaped his chest. There were no political maneuvers left to execute, no high-priced legal defense teams to call, and no financial assets capable of buying a single second of redemption. He was a man who had murdered a gentle woman to protect a stolen fortune, only to be utterly dismantled by the microscopic laws of the universe he had foolishly believed he could escape. At 11:42 p.m. on July 28, 2026, the digital heart monitor beside his bed flatlined with a steady, continuous tone. There were no family members present at his bedside, no public statements issued by the city he had once governed, and no expressions of public grief. His body was quietly claimed by a state-appointed mortuary service, his remaining assets liquidated by court-ordered receivership to fulfill civil judgments, and his legal record permanently closed in the archives of the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction as a convicted murderer who died while serving a life sentence without parole. The administrative notification of Vance's death arrived on Detective James Wright's desk the following morning in a concise, 2-sentence official memorandum from the State Department of Corrections. Wright read the memorandum quietly, set it down beside his morning coffee, and walked over to the window, looking out over the peaceful, bustling streets of Lima. He felt no surge of wild triumph or dramatic celebration. He felt only the deep, profound stillness of absolute, permanent closure, the final, legal, and biological exclamation point on a saga that had spanned 21 years, 2 generations of police officers, and an unprecedented revolution in human science. He picked up his phone and dialed Hannah Mercer's home in Oak Haven. On the other end of the line, Hannah sat on her front porch, watching her garden wind chimes sway gently in the warm morning breeze. She listened quietly as Detective Wright shared the news in a gentle, respectful tone. "Thank you, Jim," Hannah said softly, tears of quiet, peaceful contentment welling in her eyes as she looked up at the clear blue sky over Oak Haven. "It's completely finished now. Clara can rest in absolute peace." "She brought herself peace, Hannah," Wright replied gently. "She held the truth in her hands, and she gave it to us when we were finally ready to see it." That evening, as dusk settled over Allen County, a gentle, warm summer breeze blew across the quiet streets of Oak Haven. Along Mill Creek Road, the streetlights flickered on one by one, casting a soft, golden light over the historic Victorian homes, the lush green lawns, and the quiet, tree-canopied sidewalks. Inside the house where Clara Mercer had lived and worked, the windows were open to the summer night air. The peaceful sound of a young family laughing in the kitchen drifted out onto the porch, echoing softly in the quiet darkness. The dark shadow that had haunted Mill Creek Road for over 2 decades was gone forever. The cold case was solved, the perpetrator was gone, and the truth had been spoken in a voice so clear and mathematically absolute that no passage of time could ever dim its light. The story of the 2005 Oak Haven coffee cup murder had reached its final page. But as the historic implications of the case continued to echo through crime laboratories, law school lecture halls, and courtrooms across the world, the legacy of Clara Mercer remained as an eternal, unyielding promise that no matter how deep the secret, no matter how cold the storm, and no matter how many years pass in silence, the truth will always find its way home. The dawn of August 2026 marked a pivotal milestone in the evolution of modern jurisprudence and forensic genomics. Across the state of Ohio, the lingering echoes of the landmark conviction of Thomas Vance had transitioned from immediate local headlines into the broader, permanent fabric of international legal history. The case of the white ceramic coffee mug was no longer just a triumph for Allen County. It was now universally acknowledged as the primary catalyst that permanently dissolved the traditional boundaries between historical cold cases and modern digital forensics. At the epicenter of this ongoing transformation stood the Clara Mercer Institute of Forensic Genomics, an expansive, state-of-the-art research and training facility newly constructed on the campus of Ohio Northern University in nearby Ada. Funded through a collaborative partnership between state grants, federal research appropriations, and private biotech foundations, the institute served as the global operational nucleus for training prosecutors, homicide detectives, and computational geneticists in the implementation of the Oak Haven Protocol. On a crisp Monday morning, Detective James Wright stood at the polished mahogany lectern of the institute's main auditorium. Dressed in a dark navy suit with his veteran badge pinned neatly inside his jacket, he looked out across a sea of 200 active-duty homicide investigators and forensic specialists representing police agencies from 32 states and 7 foreign nations, including delegates from Scotland Yard, the Australian Federal Police, and Interpol. Behind Wright, an enormous high-definition display projected an interactive, 3-dimensional digital model of the original 2005 crime scene on Mill Creek Road. The image slowly rotated to feature the pristine white, ceramic mug resting on the Victorian study desk, its microscopic surface mapped in glowing blue and gold thermal layers, representing the distribution of touched DNA fragments. When we stepped into that cold, rain-slicked house on October 14th, 2005, Detective Wright began, his voice echoing with deep, quiet authority throughout the silent auditorium. The tools we possessed were completely inadequate to match the cold-blooded premeditation of the killer. Thomas Vance understood the limits of 20th-century forensic science. He knew how to wipe a porcelain handle with isopropyl alcohol. He knew how to avoid leaving readable latent fingerprints. He relied on time, chemical degradation, and the slow decay of human memory to construct a 19-year fortress of absolute political immunity. Wright paused, advancing the digital slide to display the complex, multi-tiered genomic alignment matrix developed by Dr. Eris Thorne. What Vance failed to comprehend, what every serial offender and calculated murderer fails to comprehend, is that science is not a static monolith, Wright continued, gesturing toward the glowing matrix. Science is a dynamic, ever-expanding horizon. The microscopic skin cells he transferred to the glazed rim of that cup while sipping his coffee were not temporary artifacts. They were biological time capsules waiting for computation to catch up with crime. Today, you are here to learn how to unlock those time capsules in your own jurisdictions. For the next 5 days, the intensive curriculum at the Institute immersed the international delegates in every facet of the Oakhaven Protocol. In the high-containment wet labs, Dr. Eris Thorne led specialized modules on advanced enzymatic extraction techniques for severely degraded biological samples. Delegates observed firsthand how ultra-deep 600x single nucleotide polymorphism (SNP) sequencing could reconstruct pristine 2 million marker genomic profiles from sub-nanogram cellular remnants, samples that standard short tandem repeat (STR) Cody's testing had deemed permanently depleted or forensically useless for over 25 years. In the mock judicial chambers, District Attorney Karen Montgomery and Assistant District Attorney Marcus Miller conducted rigorous workshops on constitutional law, Fourth Amendment compliance, and the legal mechanics of surreptitious DNA collection. They instructed prosecutors on how to construct ironclad search warrant affidavits, navigate commercial database privacy regulations, and withstand aggressive defense challenges regarding abandoned property precedents. The ultimate victory of the Vance trial wasn't merely that we placed handcuffs on a corrupt politician, Karen Montgomery told a standing room-only seminar of state attorneys general. The ultimate victory was that we built a legal pipeline so precise, so ethically transparent, and so constitutionally sound that not a single evidence ruling was overturned on appeal. When you apply this science in your home districts, your primary duty is to ensure that your chain of custody is as unassailable as the biology itself. While the Institute trained the next generation of forensic investigators, the real-world operational impact of the Mercer Vance unit continued to ripple across the nation with breathtaking velocity. In Chicago, Illinois, detectives utilizing the Institute's deep read alignment software successfully solved the 34-year-old cold case murder of a young university student, matching degraded touch DNA recovered from a vintage leather purse to a retired logistics manager living quietly in suburban Wisconsin. In Atlanta, Georgia, a specialized task force cleared a cluster of unsolved 1990s highway homicides after extracting a full genomic profile from an old, discarded soda can preserved in a police evidence locker for 32 years. In every instance, local law enforcement press conferences echoed the exact phrase that had been etched into the brass plaque at the Allen County Sheriff's Office. Every cell remembers. Meanwhile, in the quiet township of Oakhaven, the profound sense of healing that had taken root following the trial blossomed into a vibrant, enduring civic renewal. The Oakhaven Municipal Building, once tainted by the shadows of Vance's fraudulent administration, had become a national symbol of civic integrity and administrative transparency. Under the leadership of the newly elected municipal council, comprehensive ethical oversight measures were codified into the city charter, ensuring that every dollar of public funds was subject to continuous, independent digital audits open to all citizens. On an early autumn evening, as golden sunset light filtered through the canopy of ancient maple trees along Main Street, a small, intimate gathering took place at the Oakhaven Public Library. The city was officially unveiling the Clara Mercer Educational Endowment, a multi-million-dollar nonprofit foundation established through generous private donations and matching state grants. The endowment was designed to provide full university scholarships for local high school graduates pursuing careers in elementary education, public service, and forensic science. Sitting in the front row of the library's historic reading room was Hannah Mercer, her face radiant with a soft, peaceful smile. Beside her sat retired Chief David Miller, who, despite his 83 years and reliance on a wooden walking stick, attended every civic event dedicated to Clara's memory with unyielding pride. Mayor Sarah Jenkins stood at the mahogany podium, looking out at the gathered community members, former students, and local leaders. For almost 2 decades, Mayor Jenkins declared softly, "Our town was defined in the national media by a single, dark tragedy." People heard the name Oak Haven and thought of an unsolved murder on Mill Creek Road. But tonight, we stand here as a community that has walked through the fire and emerged stronger, cleaner, and deeply united. She turned to look at a large oil painting hanging above the library mantelpiece, a warm, life-sized portrait of Clara Mercer smiling gently in her 3rd-grade classroom, holding a storybook in her lap. Clara Mercer dedicated her life to illuminating young minds, teaching children that truth, courage, and kindness are the foundational pillars of a meaningful life. Jenkins continued, her voice filled with quiet emotion. Through this endowment, her light will continue to illuminate the lives of thousands of students for generations to come. The killer sought to erase her voice, but instead, he made her legacy immortal. The reading room erupted into warm, sustained applause. Hannah Mercer reached over, gently pressing Chief Miller's hand. The retired chief looked up at the portrait of the young teacher he had sworn to protect 21 years earlier, a single tear of pure, unadulterated relief trailing down his weathered cheek. As night fell over Allen County, the cool autumn air carried the crisp smell of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Outside the Mercer Vance Forensic Unit in Lima, Detective James Wright stood on the top step of the concrete plaza, looking out over the quiet city skyline. He pulled his dark overcoat tight against the brisk wind, taking a deep breath of the clear night air. His cell phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a notification from the primary sequencing server inside the lab. Oak Haven Protocol Matrix, batch 2026-20803. Genomics sequencing complete. 100% single-source alignment confirmed on case 91-0412. Notifying regional investigators. Wright smiled faintly, slipping the phone back into his pocket. The machine was running. The light was spreading. The dark corners of the past were being systematically cleared, one molecule, one marker, one long-awaited answer at a time. He walked down the stone steps toward his car, his footsteps echoing rhythmically in the quiet night. The story of Clara Mercer had begun in tears, horror, and a 19-year silence on Mill Creek Road. But through the relentless pursuit of justice, the unyielding faith of a sister, and the unstoppable light of modern science, it had ended in a triumph so absolute that time itself could never undo it. By late September 2026, the global momentum generated by the resolution of the Clara Mercer case had shifted into an unprecedented era of systemic cold case resolution. What had started as a solitary, painstaking effort inside a cramped Allen County workstation had matured into an international framework known across 5 continents as the Mercer Standard. The white ceramic coffee mug, once catalogued as mere physical evidence item 05-8821B, was now permanently enshrined in a specialized glass exhibition case inside the main atrium of the National Law Enforcement Museum in Washington, D.C., a silent, pristine symbol of scientific truth overcoming 2 decades of calculated deceit. In early October, a landmark international summit convened at the Department of Justice headquarters in Washington. Attended by federal directors, state attorneys general, top forensic geneticists, and senior delegates from Interpol, the summit was formally called to mark the nationwide integration of deep-read genomic alignment into all federal cold case workflows. Detective James Wright sat beside Dr. Eris Thorne and District Attorney Karen Montgomery on the central keynote panel before a crowded auditorium of domestic and international press. Above them hung a massive blue banner reading, "The Mercer Standard, ERA of Forensic Certainty." The United States Attorney General took the podium first, addressing the global media. For nearly a century, the Attorney General declared, his voice echoing through the Grand Hall, the passage of time was the greatest ally a violent criminal could possess. If a killer could evade initial detection, clear their immediate tracks, and survive the first few years of an investigation, The physical evidence would inevitably degrade, witnesses would move or pass away, and the case file would be consigned to a dusty basement box. The conviction of Thomas Vance in Ohio shattered that paradigm forever. The Attorney General turned toward Detective Wright and Dr. Thorne. Through the extraordinary synergy of investigative determination, constitutional rigor, and revolutionary single nucleotide polymorphism alignment, Detective Wright and Dr. Thorne proved that a single touch, a single fleeting contact between human skin and a glazed ceramic mug, leaves an indelible mark that time cannot erase. Today, the Department of Justice officially mandates the implementation of the Mercer Standard across all federal law enforcement jurisdictions. When Detective Wright stepped to the microphone, he bypassed the prepared technical slides and looked directly into the news cameras. This milestone isn't a victory for law enforcement agencies or forensic laboratories, Wright said, his voice quiet, steady, and resonant. It is a victory for the thousands of families who have spent 10, 20, or 30 years looking at an empty chair at the dinner table, wondering if the person who destroyed their world would ever face accountability. To those families, this standard is a promise. Your loved ones are not forgotten, the files are not closed, and the science is coming. While the national platform celebrated the broader structural triumph, back in Allen County, the real-world execution of that promise remained an active, day-to-day discipline. Inside the Mercer Vance Forensic Unit in Lima, the work proceeded with quiet, intense efficiency. The initial backlog of historical cold cases across the Midwest was being systematically cleared month by month. Unsolved cases from the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, cases that had stumped generations of veteran detectives, were yielding ironclad biological identities in rapid succession. On a bright, crisp morning in mid-October 2026, Detective Wright sat at his office desk reviewing a newly completed case folder. Beside him sat retired Chief David Miller, who, despite his failing health, frequently visited the unit to observe the progress of the task force he had helped inspire. Wright opened the folder, revealing a fresh genomic alignment report. It detailed the full identification of a suspect in a 32-year-old unsolved assault from a neighboring county, a breakthrough achieved by extracting touch DNA from a yellowed, vintage cotton handkerchief that had been stored in a sealed evidence envelope since 1994. "Look at this, Chief," Wright said, turning the report toward Miller. 32 years sitting on a shelf in a dark evidence room. The old STR testing couldn't get a single locus. Dr. Thorne's team ran the 600x deep read sequencing yesterday morning, pulled 1 million markers, and mapped it straight to a suspect living in Indiana. Warrants being served at noon. Chief Miller leaned forward, putting on his reading glasses as he scanned the clear digital graphs. A deep, quiet sigh of contentment escaped his chest, and his weathered hands shook slightly as he touched the paper. "Jimmy," Miller said, his voice low and filled with emotion, "for 20 years, I carried the guilt of Clara Mercer's unsolved file in my heart. Every night I retired, I thought about that white cup sitting in our storage locker, feeling like we had failed her. Seeing this unit work every day, seeing how her legacy is opening doors that were locked for decades, it makes me realize that nothing we did was in vain. The cup wasn't a dead end. It was a bridge. It was a bridge built by everyone who refused to quit on her, Chief," Wright replied softly. "You kept that box safe when everyone else said the case was dead. That's why we're standing here today." In Oak Haven, the crisp autumn wind carried a profound sense of permanent peace through the town. The Victorian house on Mill Creek Road, once the focal point of a terrifying mystery, had become an accepted, quiet part of the neighborhood's living history. Children walked past it on their way to elementary school, laughing and kicking orange maple leaves along the brick sidewalks. The dark aura that had once shrouded the address had completely evaporated, replaced by the steady rhythm of a vibrant, healthy community. On the afternoon of October 14th, 2026, marking exactly 21 years since the morning Clara Mercer was murdered, a simple, quiet gathering took place in the courtyard of Oak Haven Elementary School. There were no media cameras, no political speeches, and no grandstands. It was an intimate gathering of those who had carried the physical and emotional weight of the case from its darkest hours to its ultimate resolution. Hannah Mercer stood near the stone memorial fountain beside her daughter, Clara. Nearby stood Detective James Wright, District Attorney Karen Montgomery, Dr. Eris Thorne, Mayor Sarah Jenkins, and Chief David Miller. Together, they watched as a group of third-grade students, the same age as the children Clara had taught in 2005, placed fresh white chrysanthemums along the granite edge of the fountain. The clear water sparkled under the autumn sun, reflecting the clear blue sky above. Hannah stepped forward, holding a small silver key. She walked over to the base of the memorial fountain, where a small bronze memory box had been built into the stone structure. Inside the box rested a copy of the final judicial trial transcript of State v. Vance, a photograph of Clara smiling in her classroom, and a piece of paper signed by every member of the Modern Forensic Task Force. Hannah locked the small door, turned to the gathered friends, and smiled through quiet tears of lasting fulfillment. 21 years ago today, Hannah said softly, her voice carrying across the quiet courtyard, a terrible storm came to this town. A man thought he could take a life, wipe a cup clean, and hide behind a wall of power and lies. He thought time would bury the truth. She looked at Detective Wright and Dr. Thorne, her eyes filled with profound gratitude. But he didn't account for the power of love, the relentless dedication of honest men and women, and the miraculous light of truth. My sister's voice was silenced for 19 years, but through all of you, she spoke so clearly that the entire world listened. Today, the storm is over. Oak Haven is healed, and Clara is finally completely home. As the sun began to set behind the rolling hills of Allen County, casting a warm golden glow across the town, Detective Wright walked slowly back to his car. He paused on the edge of the school courtyard, taking a deep breath of the cool, clean evening air. He looked back one last time at the memorial fountain, at the quiet street, and at the bright lights burning in the windows of the schoolhouses and homes of Oak Haven. The white mug had yielded its final secret. The lie had been dismantled, the killer had faced justice, and the truth had been woven into the permanent fabric of human history. The long road that had begun on a rain-slicked morning in 2005 had reached its ultimate, unshakable end. Part 11. The crisp, late autumn air of November 2026 brought a deep, reflective quiet to the rolling countryside of northern Ohio. Across Allen County, the golden harvest had concluded, leaving vast,